Hey everyone, per your requests, I'm starting Sort of Coming. If possible, you can support me via PayPal or become a channel member to help me keep this channel running. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Sort of Coming audio series. Chapter 551. Lu Baixiong wasn't bothered by his question at all, and he gave an answer that was completely unexpected to Chen Ping'an. I have indeed eaten shit before. Chen Ping'an offered no response. Lu Baixiong didn't seem embarrassed at all. He smiled and continued. My background is about the same as Wei Xian's. In fact, I was in an even worse situation than him growing up. I became an orphan at a very young age, and there were a lot of bad people in my hometown. When I was 14, I was thrown into a shithole by a bunch of bullies, and 2 of them stayed by the shithole, smacking me on the head with a bamboo pole as soon as I tried to poke my head out. Hence, I had no choice but to swallow a belly full of shit. After that, I managed to get my hands on a knife. And you kill them one by one? Chen Ping'an asked. No, Lu Baixiong replied with a shake of his head. I caught one of them while he was stumbling home drunk and stabbed him in the stomach. After that, I pissed myself and ended up getting caught and thrown into jail. After that, I couldn't stay in my hometown any longer, so I went out to explore the world. Honestly, I was just trying to survive. One day, my luck suddenly turned, and my life suddenly took a drastic turn for the better. I ate some rare spiritual herb, then obtained a powerful cultivation art. From there, I became entangled with many romantic partners and found many soulmates. However, I always had low self-esteem, and I did everything in my power to make myself appear wealthy and cultured. I wanted to become a scholar, to be considered elegant and refined by everyone. Thankfully, I'm pretty smart, and I pick things up quite quickly. On top of that, no matter what I do, I always want to be number 1 to be the best, but if I can't get there, then I can let go just as easily. I know that Julien came from a truly wealthy clan. Sui Yubian's upbringing was a little worse than his, but even so, she still came from an extremely powerful clan, and by some stroke of luck, she became a direct disciple of the largest sect in the Lotus Flower-blessed land. It's very hard to believe that you're the founding father of the demonic orthodoxy in the Lotus Flower-blessed land. You don't need to tell me what happened to the demonic orthodoxy after my passing. I'm well aware of what it became. Once you've read enough history books, you'll come to realize that history always repeats itself. Whether it be in the imperial court or the martial arts world, it's all about drawing circles. Occasionally, some virtuous sage or martial arts prodigy would emerge, and they would be able to go out a little further and expand the circle slightly, while those who come after them repeat this cycle. Occasionally, people will also stumble around erratically with no direction or destination, Chen Ping'an said. Lu Baixiong nodded in response. That's what happens in times of unrest, when human lives are worth no more than those of chickens and dogs. Both of them fell silent for a long while. By the way, I'm very curious, why are you so determined to learn and abide by principles that you think are right? Lu Baixiong asked. I suppose it's also out of low self-esteem. One always wants what they lack, do they not? Can you elaborate? My parents passed away when I was very young. Living on my own, there's no one to scold me, but also no one to praise me. I've always wanted to do things correctly so that my neighbors don't speak badly of me behind my back. I didn't care if they spoke badly of me, but it'd have reflected badly on my parents. On top of that, I've experienced true poverty, so I've come to be afraid of it. Hence, I like to hear people espouse principles, and I also like money. I don't like to owe people money, nor do I like it when other people owe me money. Lu Baixiong was silent for a long while, then replied, That's very candid of you. While the 2 of them were chatting with each other, Julien sat on his stool and read his book, not interrupting their conversation. Meanwhile, Sui Yubian was also standing nearby with her hands clasped behind her back. After hearing Chen Ping'an talk about not liking it when people owed him money, she gave a cold harumph before returning to her room. Julien chuckled in amusement as he continued to read. Lu Baixiong rose to his feet and cupped his fist in a parting salute as he said, Thank you for enlightening me. Don't put me on such a pedestal, I was only speaking what was on my mind. Chen Ping'an chuckled. All of a sudden a thought occurred to him. At this rate, Pei Qian was doomed to never learn martial arts, so he may as well put in one last-ditch effort and try to teach her the 18 stops technique. However, a hesitant look then appeared on his face, and after some careful contemplation, he decided to hold off for now. In that nameless little inn, the old man who had been frequenting the dust medicinal shop daily over the past few days had just bathed and changed into a set of new clothes, and he sat down in a formal manner in front of his table. On the table were 20 or 30 scrolls, numerous bowls with different quantities of water in them, and a bunch of other miscellaneous items. All of these were artifacts similar to enchanted picture scrolls from immortals sections. These bowls of water were very similar in appearance to the one that the little boy in azure had used to spy on celestial maiden Su Jia. If the little boy in azure were to meet this old man, then the former would undoubtedly proclaim the latter to be his idol. As it turned out, the nickname that the little boy in azure had given to himself, chivalrous young man from the Imperial River, was inspired by this senior, whose nickname was handsome chivalrous young man. Handsome chivalrous young man and Footlong Spear were considered to be the two undisputed leading figures in this field, and they were showered with respect and adulation by their juniors. These two old men were extraordinarily wealthy and generous, and the first clash that took place between them involved an argument of which one of Su Jia and He Xiaoyang was true number one celestial maiden on Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. Handsome chivalrous young man proclaimed it to be Su Jia. He said that Su Jia had the looks, the disposition, and the charm, while He Xiaoyang was certainly beautiful in her own right, but she was a little lacking when it came to charm and approachability, which made her slightly cold and distant. Footlong Spear was furious and immediately began defending He Xiaoyang, and the two of them began hurling lesser heat coins into the bowl of water one after another, all so that they could get the last word in over the other. Snowflake coins that had undergone basic refinement could also be tossed into all types of enchanted picture artifacts, but they didn't contain sufficient spiritual energy to transmit messages. All of these donations would go on to contribute to the spiritual energy in the sects that these celestial maidens belonged to. A single snowflake coin wasn't much, but one could not downplay the effects of steady accumulation over time. There really were some small sects that had received massive influxes of spiritual energy, thanks to their beautiful female disciples, and their ability to attract donations from wealthy individuals. A lesser heat coin contained enough spiritual energy to relay a verbal message of 1 or 2 sentences, and all in all Footlong Spear and handsome chivalrous young man had each slammed down 70 to 80 lesser heat coins during their initial clash. That battle immediately went down in the history books as the beginning of a rivalry for the ages. There were countless celestial maidens from smaller sects praying to the heavens that these two old immortals would bless their sects with their presence and lay down life-changing sums of money. Footlong Spear was a man of few words, normally only making silent donations, while handsome chivalrous young man was extremely talkative, often attaching loud verbal messages with his donations, and he thoroughly enjoyed the flattery and flirtatious advances from all of the celestial maidens that he kept up with. The old man's gaze roamed over the table for quite some time before finally settling on a picture scroll. He unfurled the scroll and after waiting for a moment, a cloud of mist began to rise up from the scroll, forming an image of a room with simple yet elegant furnishings. A young celestial maiden emerged in a graceful manner while carrying a pipa, and she was followed by a maidservant, who stood obediently in a corner behind her as she sat down. The celestial maiden played a song on her pipa, but not a single verbal message rang out in her room. This meant that no one had a single lesser heat coin. Alternatively, such a donation had been made, but it was not accompanied by a verbal message. However, that was extremely unlikely. The celestial maiden put on a forced smile and gave a rather awkward address. She wasn't a professional prostitute or anything of the sort, and she had just been forced into this type of fundraising activity by her sect, so she was still feeling very awkward and self-conscious. Right at this moment, a verbal message suddenly rang out in her room. "Is handsome chivalrous young man there?" This was met with an immediate response. "No." The celestial maiden was ecstatic, and she hurriedly rose to her feet before extending a curtsy as she greeted them. "Welcome, Senior Young Ascended Immortal and Senior 10th Tier Martial Artist." These were Footlong Spear and handsome chivalrous young man's alternate titles. The celestial maiden was extremely excited to have hooked onto a pair of such massive fish, and she sat back down, preparing to play another song on her pipa for these two extraordinarily wealthy and generous seniors. However, as she did so, she spotted her unmoving maidservant out of the corner of her peripheral vision, and a cold look flashed through her eyes, but she put on a smile as she said, You should thank these esteemed immortals, Shi Qiu. The maidservant also extended a curtsy upon hearing this. After the celestial maiden finished her song, the old man at the inn tossed in another lesser heat coin as he said, "Handsome chivalrous young man, I've arrived in Old Dragon City. How about the two of us meet up for a drink?" Handsome chivalrous young man's response was very brief and concise. "Piss off." The old man tossed in another lesser heat coin. "Why so cold? I can come to visit you so you don't even have to go anywhere, and I'll only be visiting for a few days." Handsome chivalrous young man. "I don't have time." Footlong spear. "Don't be like that. Surely you at least have time for a meal together." Handsome chivalrous young man. "Nope." Footlong spear was furious. 10th tier martial artist. You're a chi refiner posing as a 10th tier martial artist. Have you no shame? Handsome chivalrous young man replied. Then why are you called young ascended immortal when you haven't ascended? Why don't you ascend to the heavens and take a dump? If you're capable of that, I guarantee that I'll open my mouth to catch it. Footlong spear began to change tact. Handsome chivalrous young man, everyone knows that you're a great man. Wouldn't you feel guilty if I came all this way for nothing? Handsome chivalrous young man was silent for a moment, while Footlong spear waited anxiously for his answer. In the end, handsome chivalrous young man replied, Fine, come if you must. Footlong spear was ecstatic and he immediately said, Thank you, thank you. It's decided then. I'll secretly announce my arrival to you once I reach your sect. Handsome chivalrous young man. Shut up. Footlong spear remained completely unbothered as he replied, Your wish is my command. I can't wait to meet you. If any disciples of Jade Tablet sect were present to witness the shameless display being put on by their old sect master, their jaws would most likely drop straight to the ground in shock. It was going to be the final day of the year in a few more days. That night after dinner, Pei Qian helped Julien clear the table, and after completing her transcriptions, she made her way to the shop to look for Chen Ping'an. Chen Ping'an had already poured the flagon of wine brought to him by Fan Junmao into his sword-nurturing gourd. At the very most he could only drink 2 or 3 sips a day. If he were to drink any more than that, then it would have a detrimental effect on him instead. As was the case with everything, excess was never a good thing, and it didn't have to take a lot of excess to have severe consequences. Chen Ping'an had just had a sip of basic refinement wine, so his face was a little flushed. Pei Qian was standing on the tips of her toes on the other side of the counter, watching quietly as Chen Ping'an took more sips of wine. Chen Ping'an set down his sword-nurturing gourd and casually asked, Do you miss the lotus flower-blessed land? Pei Qian shook her head in response. You don't miss your parents? Chen Ping'an asked with a smile. Pei Qian hesitated momentarily before shaking her head once again. Are you mad at me? She asked. Instead of answering her question, Chen Ping'an asked, Why don't you think about them? Pei Qian's expression remained placid as she pursed her lips and replied, I just don't want to. Chen Ping'an didn't say anything further. Pei Qian was resting her chin on the counter, and she slapped her talisman onto her forehead. She was silent for a long while before she continued. When I was really small, there was a natural disaster in my hometown, and while fleeing for our lives, my mother died on the road from starvation, so my father brought me to the capital city of Southern Garden Nation by himself. Along the way, my father forced my mother to whore herself out to other men in exchange for food. Initially, my mother was unwilling, but my father grabbed her by the hair and beat her into submission. All I could do was cry at the time. Whenever I tried to get in my father's way, he would sweep me aside. He's a man, so he was naturally stronger than my mother and me. After that, whenever my mother came back with food, he would eat the most, my mother would eat less than him, and I would have the least food. One time, I woke up in the middle of the night to discover my mother sneaking outside to eat a really dirty-looking steamed bun without telling me. I didn't say anything and went back to sleep. After that, my mother seemed to have grown sick, but my father didn't care. He carried her on his back, presumably because she was still useful to him. But one day, my father told me that my mother had starved to death. After that, my father tried to sell me, but he failed, so he told me to go and steal. I was caught and beaten many times, and he would call me stupid and useless. We walked all the way to the capital city, and we were fortunate enough to encounter a charity food stall opened by a wealthy man. The stall gave out congee and beautiful white steamed buns. My father was stuffing food down his mouth as quickly as he could when all of a sudden, he fell to the ground and died, seemingly from overstuffing himself. I watched him as he died, and for some reason, the only thing that I was thinking at the time was I hope my father can catch up to my mother on the other side so that they would be able to cross into the afterlife together. Chen Ping'an leaned forward and patted Pei Qian on the head as he said, "Go to bed." Pei Qian nodded vigorously in response with a wide smile, then skipped her way to her room to sleep. As she did so, she yelled, "Stay back, all evil spirits, lest you be smitten by my talisman." Chen Ping'an continued to sit on his own. From that day onward, Chen Ping'an became more and more strict with Pei Qian, even going as far as to sit beside her every day to watch her make her transcriptions. 1st and 15th continued to whittle away at the piece of dragon-slaying platform, and by the time that had almost consumed the entire piece of dragon-slaying platform, it was already the 29th day of the last month of the year. Pei Qian, Wei Xian and Sui Yubian had gone out 5 or 6 times to purchase a ton of things for the dust medicinal shop in anticipation of the new year. Each time, Pei Qian had begged Sui Yubian to accompany them, and that turned out to be for good reason. All Sui Yubian had to do was stand near the shops that they visited, and the shopkeepers would voluntarily drop their prices without requiring any bartering from Pei Qian and Wei Xian. They always went out early in the morning and returned late at night, and upon their return, the old man would still be reading under the locust tree at the intersection between the street and the alley. Initially, he was a bit more subdued, but after familiarizing himself with everyone from the medicinal shop, he began to greet them whenever they returned. For the last 2 trips, Wei Xian didn't accompany them. Instead, it was just Sui Yubian and Pei Qian, and the latter was carrying Chen Ping'an's bamboo bookcase on her back to store all of their purchases. As they returned to the alley, the old man greeted them again. Pei Qian eagerly responded in a sweet and exuberant manner, while Sui Yubian remained silent. As they stepped into the medicinal shop, Chen Ping'an was still seated behind the counter as usual, and Pei Qian immediately began giving him a detailed account of all of the shops that they had visited at what time, as well as the original prices and the final prices of all of the items that they purchased, while Chen Ping'an made calculations on his abacus. As soon as Pei Qian's account concluded, the sound of the clacking abacus beads also instantly subsided, and Chen Ping'an gave Sui Yubian a thumbs up as he said, "We've saved roughly 100 taels of silver on stationery alone." Pei Qian lifted the bamboo curtain for Sui Yubian, while the latter made her way to the back of the shop to unload their purchases. Pei Qian snuck back over to the counter, then got up onto the tips of her toes and rested her chin on the table with an expectant smile on her face, clearly asking for a reward. Chen Ping'an took a glance over at the bamboo curtain, then sneakily handed 7 or 8 copper coins to Pei Qian as he said, "Make sure to keep this safe and don't let anyone else see it. If Sui Yubian sees this, both of us will be in trouble. Make sure to help Sui Yubian unload everything. Don't just make her do it all on her own, and thank her for her hard work at the end," Chen Ping'an called out. "Got it." Pei Qian yelled in response, and a faint smile appeared on Chen Ping'an's face. The next day was going to be the final day of the year, the gateway from one year to the next. Never had Chen Ping'an imagined that there would be so many people celebrating the turn of the year together in the dust medicinal shop. For the first few shopping trips, Sui Yubian was very reluctant to go. After that, Wei Xian no longer wanted to go, but Sui Yubian had really developed a taste for shopping, and she dragged Pei Qian around everywhere on their epic shopping sprees. Initially, it was Zhu Lian who had approached Pei Qian in secret, promising to gift her a set of 4 treasures of the study and some pocket money if she could convince Sui Yubian to go out shopping with her. Pei Qian told him that she would consider his offer, then went to Chen Ping'an. Chen Ping'an felt like it would be a good thing for Sui Yubian to go out more. At the very least, it would help her get in better touch with the world around her instead of being so cold and detached all the time. So he instructed Pei Qian to agree to Zhu Lian's offer. Hence, Pei Qian began nagging her insistently like an annoying little fly, constantly disrupting her cultivation, so in the end she could only cave and go out shopping with her and Wei Xian. After that, Sui Yubian grabbed the bamboo bookcase in the corner of her shared room with Pei Qian, then took the initiative to drag Pei Qian out for a shopping spree. Chen Ping'an made an agreement with Pei Qian in secret, promising to give her a copper coin for each time Sui Yubian bartered with the shopkeeper. All of a sudden, Qian Ping'an cast his gaze out of the medicinal shop. The light outside the alley had suddenly become very dim, as if a heavy dark cloud had suddenly descended upon the alley, but there was no cloud to be seen. Immediately thereafter, the green-robed Fan Junmao descended out of the sky. Qian Ping'an made his way around the counter, then emerged from the shop. "Have you made up your mind?" Fan Junmao asked. Qian Ping'an nodded in response. "Hopefully, this year can have a good conclusion." Fan Junmao turned to the Zhao clan Insol as she warned, "Don't try to use your powers to see what's happening above the sea of clouds. Otherwise, Qian Ping'an will be the one who suffers the consequences." The Insol nodded in response. By using the formation in the medicinal shop to attain unpolished jade tier powers, he would indeed be able to observe what was taking place above the sea of clouds. However, the spiritual energy of the sea of clouds was very pristine and pure, while his energy as a Yin soul was the complete opposite. The two conflicting types of energy could easily cause the sea of clouds to descend into a state of disarray, thereby ruining Qian Ping'an's bonded item refinement and harming the foundation of his great Tao. Fan Junmao grabbed onto Qian Ping'an's shoulder, and she was just about to fly up to the sea of clouds above when Qian Ping'an suddenly said, "According to the books I've read, immortals will pick out a suitable time, date, and location prior to commencing pill refinement, and on that day they'll fast, bathe, and change into new clothes, then kneel down while holding a cauldron to pray to heaven and earth. You're saying I don't need to do that?" A disdainful sneer appeared on Fan Junmao's face as she replied, "On the sea of clouds, I am the equivalent of a mountain master in their academy, an abbot in their Taoist temple, or an arhat in their monastery. I am the sage of the small world that is the sea of clouds, so who do you need to pray to? Me? If you're willing to kneel down and kowtow to me, I'm most likely going to be struck down again and drop down another cultivation rank, but that's not really a concern for me. I can always regain my lost cultivation base, but there won't be that many opportunities where I can make you kowtow to me." Qian Ping'an was enlightened upon hearing this. It seemed that even though Lu Yong was a nascent tier cultivator, he still couldn't be considered a sage on Clear Realm Mountain, so he was unable to draw upon the fortune of the land around him as he pleased. After being dragged up into the sea of clouds by Fan Junmao, Qian Ping'an took a moment to steady himself. He gently trod down onto the sea of clouds below and discovered that it had the same consistency as the average dirt road, just like how it had felt when he stood upon the water after his Yin soul had emerged from the water god temple. Fan Junmao swept a sleeve through the air, and a large white table formed by cloud and mist appeared in front of Qian Ping'an. The surface of the table was as smooth as a mirror, and there were tendrils of mist drifting all over it. The pocket treasure, 15th, and the minimization treasure that was the white jade tablet were hovering above the table before him. In a very slow and deliberate fashion, he pulled out a series of items required to refine his bonded item from the pair of storage treasures. Aside from the cauldron that Qian Ping'an had purchased from Lu Yong for 50 grain rain coins, there were also the close to 50 types of natural treasures that Qian Ping'an had secured from Fan Junmao in exchange for the nascent tier food dragon's golden core. There were 12 types of sand alone, and they were to be used at different points in the refinement process for various different purposes. Qian Ping'an was pulling out the items one after another in an unhurried manner, while Fan Junmao was becoming more and more agitated by the second, having to fight back the urge to tell him to hurry up. All of a sudden, she slapped a jade pendant onto the cloud table as she said, "In order to refine that water seal, the most important secondary ingredient is water essence of a sufficient caliber for the task. Otherwise, it'll have a detrimental effect on the entire refinement process. This old dragon Rainbringer is the best piece of water essence that I can currently find. It's about as old as Old Dragon City itself, and it's absorbed much of the water fortune essence of the Sea of Clouds. There's no need to talk money with me, just treat this as a bet that I'm making on you, just like that flagon of basic refinement medicinal wine. Having said that, if you insist on talking money, then that's fine too. I can sell this jade pendant to you for the cheap price of 30 grain rain coins. Aren't you the only one talking money here?" Qian Ping'an asked with a smile. A perplexed look appeared on Fan Junmao's face upon hearing this, and she asked, "Do you really feel justified in accepting such a precious old dragon Rainbringer free of charge? This thing has been worshipped in the Fu clan's ancestral hall for over 1,000 years, and it's extremely valuable. I'm only charging you 30 grain rain coins, And this item is vital to ensure that you can refine a bonded item of the best possible caliber. Does that not make it worth the money in your eyes? This is only a part of the compensation that the Fu clan has promised us, and you're only passing it on to me as a middleman. Yet you want to earn 30 grain rain coins just for running such a simple errand? Chun Ping'an scoffed. It looks like you must have stumbled upon some hard times lately. I presume that your drop in cultivation base isn't just a simple reversion from the nascent tier to the golden core tier. Has your foundation been harmed just like that sword-devouring arc did to me? You've been trying to devour the sea of clouds to treat your injuries, but that must not be working very well. It must be very costly to replenish the water essence that's been sucked into your acupoints from the sea of clouds, right? You may do some stupid things, but you're not a fool at all. Fan Junmao grumbled in a disgruntled manner. Finally, Chun Ping'an pulled out the water seal before gently placing it onto the cloud table. Fan Junmao took a long glance at the seal, then asked, "Are you really going to refine this seal? Once it becomes a bonded item of yours, you'll be directly harming the foundation of your own great Tao if you ever use it to grant fortune to other bodies of water. Of course, if you don't do such a foolish thing, then this water seal will be immensely beneficial to you once it becomes your water attribute bonded item. Normally, the acupoint open through this process is the size of a well or a small pond, but you have a chance to create a little lake for yourself. Right now, spiritual energy is gushing into all of your acupoints to whittle away at your true qi. But if you can pull this off successfully, then that crisis can be easily averted." "I've already made up my mind," Chun Ping'an replied with a determined nod. He then reached out to stroke the old dragon Rainbringer, and he was struck by a sense of familiarity. His brows furrowed slightly as he looked up at Fan Junmao, then asked, "This is a piece of water essence? Why the skeptical look? Are you worried that I'm trying to scam you?" Fan Junmao sneered with a cold look in her eyes. Chun Ping'an shook his head in response, and after a brief moment of hesitation, he pulled out the jade slip that had been bestowed upon him by the burial river goddess, then asked, "Is this thing water essence as well?" As soon the jade slip appeared, the surrounding sea of clouds immediately began to dance with joy like a bunch of small children eyeing a piece of candy. A stunned look appeared on Fan Junmao's face as she asked, "Where did you get that from?" Chun Ping'an smiled as he said, "I'll take that as a yes to my question then. It seems as a superior piece of water essence to this old dragon Rainbringer." This was the second time since hearing about the 12th demon core in Chun Ping'an's possession that she had been struck by the urge to take something from him by force. However, on this occasion, she quickly suppressed that impulsive urge. After learning about Chun Ping'an's relationship with the sword spirit, she didn't dare to consider making any moves on Chun Ping'an. All she could do was scoot a little closer to Chun Ping'an so that she could take a longing glance at the jade tablet. Chun Ping'an didn't know the true value of this jade tablet, but she did, and she could tell that this was definitely an item manifested from the water fortune essence of a certain large water vein from Dragon Palace in a major river. Compared with this old dragon Rainbringer, well, there really was no comparison between the two. It was like night and day. The reason why Fan Junmao desired this jade slip so intensely was that she could tell that refining this jade slip would be sufficient to replenish the sea of clouds to its original condition, and it would also be more than enough to restore her cultivation base to the nascent tier. From there, she would be able to easily reach the upper 5 tiers in just 3 or 4 more decades, and once she reached the upper 5 tiers, it would be a simple matter of revisiting places that she had already explored, breaking open different small world secret areas in search of fated opportunities. The process would be much safer and make for far more bountiful returns compared with the average cultivator that had to venture into secret areas that were fraught with peril. I can use this as the water essence to refine the water seal into my water attribute bonded item, right? Chun Ping'an asked. Of course you can. Fan Junmao spat through gritted teeth. You are the luckiest bastard I've ever met. Do you know how rare this thing is? This is an innate immortal treasure. If this thing were to appear in a small world that's not presided over by a sage, a bunch of golden core and nascent tier earth immortals would fight to the death over something. In fact, there's a very good chance that even some unpolished jade tier cultivators would throw their hats into the ring. Fate has different things in store for everyone, Chun Ping'an said with a smile. If I had grown up my entire life in Old Dragon City, I could perhaps stay here for 1,000 years without earning a single opportunity to stand atop this sea of clouds. Just the same, had you gone and explored that water god temple for 10,000 years, there's still no guarantee that you would have been able to secure this jade slip. That is true, Fan Junmao admitted with a nod. Alright, cut the chit-chat and hurry up. You've already wasted more than enough time. She then took a deep breath before making a series of hand seals, and the outermost parts of the giant sea of clouds looming over the entirety of Old Dragon City began to rapidly curl up, presenting a sight much like a lotus flower in full bloom reverting back to a flower bud. The sea of clouds encompassed Chunpingen, Fan Junmao, and the cloud table from all directions, and countless rays of white light began to cascade down from above like water from a flowing creek. Spiritual energy rose up from all directions, making it rather difficult for Chunpingen to breathe. Upon noticing the mocking look in Fan Junmao's eyes, he pulled out the golden jade tablet that carried the inscription of Nurturing the Noble Spirit, and hung it at his waist. The surrounding spiritual energy instantly began to surge into the jade tablet in a frenzy, and Fan Junmao hurriedly swept a sleeve through to scatter the surrounding water essence from the sea of clouds that was exerting pressure upon Chunpingen. Otherwise, all of it would be sucked into the jade tablet, thereby further whittling down the sea of clouds. After that, Fan Junmao flew out of the giant flower bud formed by the sea of clouds, then communicated to Chunpingen through voice transmission. If you encounter any trouble, then stop the refinement process right away. You run the risk of sustaining injuries and losing all of your materials if you do that, but the alternative could quite possibly cost you your life. Also, you can adjust the height of that cloud table as you please with just a single thought. Chunpingen sat down with his legs crossed, and the cloud table indeed descended in front of him until it resembled a white mat draped over the ground. On the cloud table were the water seal, the 5-colored golden box cauldron, the water essence jade slip from the unknown dragon palace, and the old dragon rainbringer, which was currently looking rather redundant. There were also over 40 natural treasures, which included 12 types of sand of different colors, all of which were supposed to become more and more profound the longer that they were refined. There was the dense and heavy infernal water sand, the Great Dipper sand that glowed with radiant starlight. All of these priceless types of sand were stored in transparent glass containers of different sizes. Chunpingen was seated atop the sea of clouds, inspecting his surroundings. Even though he was situated in the giant flower bud formed by the sea of clouds, his vision wasn't impeded at all, and he was still able to see the ocean on 3 sides. Ideally, he would be able to successfully carry out the refinement process on his first try and refine the water seal into his bonded item using the jade slip as water essence. If he were to fail, then jade slip would disintegrate, releasing all of the water essence that it contained. However, the water essence would not go to waste as it would be drawn into the golden jade slip that he was wearing as spiritual energy. Even if some of the water essence were to escape, it would fuse into the sea of clouds, and that would serve as compensation for the assistance that Fan Junmao had provided. In this case, he could still use the old dragon rainbringer as his backup water essence to attempt the process again. Chunpingen practiced his standing meditation momentarily to calm himself down, and in his mind, he was visualizing the process of pottery firing that he had frequently carried out as a child. After tossing a large handful of lesser heat coins into the 5-colored golden box cauldron on the cloud table, 5 colored clouds began to billow out of the mouths of the 5 beasts on the edge of the cauldron. Chunpingen drew upon the true qi in his own body, then gently exhaled into the cauldron to start the fire. This long breath of true qi swirled around the inner wall of the cauldron like a fiery dragon, leaving a trail of flames in its wake. When it came to the true flame required for refining items, the quantity determined whether the flame would be successfully lit up in the cauldron, while the purity of the flame determined the caliber of the refined product. The jade slip didn't have to take root in any of Chunpingen's acupoints to be refined, so the process posed no threat to his life, and it also didn't require as many natural treasures and sands of different varieties to refine as the water seal. Chunpingen had already studied the pill refinement scripture given to him by Lu Yong for quite some time, and he had also been studying the immortal mantra on the jade slip on a daily basis. Both things were extremely comprehensive in the information that they imparted, containing the most precious insights from Lu Yong and the Burial River Goddess. In particular, the jade slip contained the culmination of the Burial River Goddess' lifetime of work, and all Chen Ping'an had to do was follow the instructions step by step. Everything was laid out for him in fine detail, including when to inject additional breaths of true qi to fuel the flame, when to toss what amount of which type of sand into the cauldron, and when to recite the immortal mantra inscribed onto the jade slip to summon a storm, combining the rain that fell from the heavens with the flame in the cauldron to aid in the refinement process. Hence, even though the process was a rather wearisome one, it wasn't particularly difficult. Fan Junmao was seated outside the giant flower bud formed by the sea of clouds, constantly ready to issue instructions to Chen Ping'an if he were to go wrong in any of the steps, but to her surprise, Chen Ping'an was extremely calm and composed throughout the entire process. In fact, he was so composed that he would even close his eyes to rest during the windows of time where there was nothing for him to do, and even his breathing was very measured and well regulated. This is your first time refining an innate spirit treasure of such a high caliber, so why aren't you nervous at all? Can't you make a few more mistakes? I've done so much for you. Surely it's not too much to ask for you to slip up here and there to contribute a bit more water essence to my sea of clouds. Before long, it became abundantly apparent that there was no need for her to continue watching over Chen Ping'an, so she promptly laid down and went to sleep. Everything was going so smoothly that there wasn't any opportunity for her to profit from Chen Ping'an's mistakes. Just as Fan Junmao anticipated, everything continued to go smoothly all the way until the following morning. At this point, Chen Ping'an had already completed the majority of the refinement process, and all that remained were the characters that had been inscribed onto the jade slip. These characters had most likely been refined onto the jade slip, using the same refinement method by the jade slip's former owner. These characters harbored the true intent of the Great Tao, granting them some level of sentience, so even after their vessel in the form of the jade slip had been refined, they were still unwilling to be erased from this world. All things inevitably developed a fear of death upon attaining sentience, but the Great Tao mandated that all living beings be subjected to the cycle of life and death. Hence, the act of cultivation went against natural order, and its ultimate goal was to cultivate an undying body that could withstand the ravages of time. It was extremely rare to see a passage of text in an immortal mantra developing sentience on its own. Fan Junmao got up into a seated position to look down at the sprightly green characters. There were over 1,000, and all of them were swirling incessantly within the 5-colored golden box cauldron. Fan Junmao hesitated momentarily, then advised, Chen Ping'an, I suggest you find a way to gather this passage of text. If you encounter a suitable disciple in the future, you can ingrain this passage of text directly onto their soul to impart this immortal mantra upon them. This is a method commonly employed by immortals to impart certain immortal techniques upon their direct disciples, and that's why the process of passing down their inheritances is a relatively simple one for them. Before you pass them on to someone else, these characters will remain in your acupoint and nurture your soul from the inside. This is one of the few ways that one can nourish their soul, and there are no negative after effects, so if you can pull this off, then it'll truly be a huge blessing for you. A hesitant look appeared on Chen Ping'an's face, and he didn't know how to go about doing this. I can't help you with this, Fan Junmao said with a smile. These characters that develop sentience aren't things that you can simply capture at will with any treasures or immortal abilities. If they detect that your intentions are impure, then they'll disintegrate right away, and even a cultivator of the upper 5 tiers wouldn't be able to salvage them. A thought immediately arose in Chen Ping'an's mind upon hearing this. He was determined to gather all of these characters and return them to the burial river goddess in Green Roving Residence someday. He had never intended for these sentient characters to arise. They originated from Green Roving Residence, so they should be returned there as a piece of inheritance for the burial river goddess to continue to pass down. All of the characters were darting around in a hesitant manner, but as soon as this thought occurred to Chen Ping'an, the characters immediately transformed into tiny green-robed figures that bowed down and kowtowed to him in earnest displays of gratitude. After that, they converged to form a stream that gushed into the acupoint that Chen Ping'an intended to transform into the home for his water seal. Fan Junmao rolled her eyes upon seeing this, then laid back down in a huff as she grumbled to herself. Is there no end to this bastard's luck? I've never seen anything before. At this point, the jade slip had already been completely refined, and some of the taller green-robed figures gathered together. then hoisted the jade slip onto their shoulders before carrying it with them into Qian Pingin's acupoint. After that, it seemed like the green-robed figure still felt like they had to do more to repay Qian Pingin, and they began carrying out various tasks inside the acupoint. Some of them made their way over to the entrance of the acupoint to begin drawing a pair of door gods, while the others began drawing a large river on the walls of the acupoint, instantly transforming the bare and lifeless acupoint into a vibrant one that was full of exuberance. Fan Juanmao's jaw dropped to the clouds when she saw this. She sprang to her feet as she stabbed a finger in Qian Pingin's direction and yelled, "Qian Pingin, you're the reincarnation of a rain god, aren't you?" Qian Pingin had already begun stowing the natural treasures on the cloud table back into his storage treasures, doing so in a very deliberate and meticulous fashion as he looked up at Fan Junmao and jibed, "Are you trying to suck up to me? If so, you've chosen a very unique angle." The giant flower bud formation unfurled itself at Fan Juanmao's behest, following which she arrived by Qian Pingin's side in an instant, scrutinizing him closely as she mused, "You don't look like a rain god. This doesn't make any sense. How were you able to make those tiny figures submit to you so willingly?" Qian Pingin paid no heed to the astonished Fan Junmao as he continued packing his things away, and after he was done, he stood up with a smile as he asked, "How do I go back?" Fan Junmao snapped her fingers, and the sea of clouds beneath Qian Pingin's feet slowly parted to reveal a cloud staircase that led straight to the dust medicinal shop. There were bursts of rainbow light flashing incessantly around the cloud staircase, and Qian Pingin knew that this was the unique light produced by the clashing flows of time between two worlds. Hence, no one in Old Dragon City aside from cultivators of the upper 5 tiers would be able to see him as he descended the staircase. Qian Pingin thanked Fan Junmao before making his way down the cloud staircase, taking in the majestic sights and scenes of Old Dragon City along the way while thinking to himself that this was something worthy of recording on a bamboo slip so that he could tell Ningyao about it the next time he saw her. Early in the morning on the final day of the year, all of the ordinary households in Old Dragon City were already reveling in festivities, completely unaffected by the tension and apprehension in all of the city's major clans. The Fu clan had lifted the lockdown in the city, so all of the streets and alleys were extremely lively and bustling. Over at the dust medicinal shop, the cloud staircase faded away as soon as Qian Pingin set foot on the small alley. The Zhao clan Insol was very relieved to see his safe return, and he asked, "Have you successfully refined your bonded item?" Qian Pingin shook his head as he replied with a smile, "I've only refined a piece of water essence, but that's going to significantly increase my chances of successfully refining my bonded item next time." "That's fantastic news," the Insol replied with a nod. Qian Pingin made his way back to the counter in the medicinal shop. He had already stowed his golden jade tablet away the night before. Otherwise, if he had worn it this entire time, then it would have constantly been devouring the water fortune of the Sea of Clouds, and Fan Junmao would have been furious. At this point, Zhang Dafeng was already able to move around, and early this morning, he instructed Pei Qian to carry a small stool out to the locust tree for him so that he could go and meet the old man that Zhu Lian had spoken so highly of. Sure enough, the old man was already there, reading a book under the locust tree, while Zhu Lian had also gotten up very early in the morning to learn from his respected senior. As soon as Zhang Dafeng sat down onto the stool, he immediately went back on his word, dismissing Pei Qian and telling her to go back and play by herself at the shop. Pei Qian was naturally unwilling to oblige, and she extended a hand toward Zhang Dafeng, demanding that he pay her the promised compensation of 1 copper coin. It was only right that she be compensated for her work, so even if Qian Pingin were to find out, there would be no reason for him to get mad at her. Hence, she felt very justified in her demands. Zhang Dafeng didn't want to deal with her, so he told her that he would throw an extra copper coin in the New Year's money that he was going to give her. Pei Qian refused to budge, telling Zhang Dafeng that she didn't like it when other people owed her money. On top of that, owing someone money on the last day of the year was a very bad omen, so if Zhang Dafeng didn't repay his debt, then he would have bad luck for the entirety of the following year. The old man was reclining on a wicker chair, and he chimed in agreement with Pei Qian, telling Zhang Dafeng that this was the worst possible time of the year to be owing someone money, and that even a debt of a single copper coin could ruin his fortunes for the entirety of the upcoming year. Zhang Dafeng reluctantly rummaged around in his pockets for a long while, but was unable to find even half a copper coin, And right as he was racking his brains for a solution, the old man came to his rescue. The solution proposed by the old man was for Zheng Dafeng to sell his stool to him, and the money used to purchase the stool could then be given to Pei Qian as her compensation. Zheng Dafeng felt was a good solution. It was just a little stool, and he could just ask Chen Ping'an to make another one. Chen Ping'an was very good with his hands, and he also enjoyed making little crafts like furniture and bookcases. Pei Qian rolled her eyes as he scoffed. "You two are the stingiest people I've ever met. Forget it, I'll let you off the hook this time. Just treat it as an act of charity from the kindness of my heart." She then put on a serious expression, as if she had just done Zheng Dafeng a massive favor, and she continued, "There's no need to thank me, just remember what I've done for you." After that, she swaggered back into the alley while practicing her walking meditation, and all of a sudden, she was struck by the urge to imitate the sweeping kick that Liu Baixiang had demonstrated. As soon as this thought sprang into her mind, she leaped up into the air, and she really was able to perform a full pirouette while kicking out in midair. Unfortunately, her landing was far from smooth, and she thudded to the ground like a puppet with the strings cut. She immediately sprang back to her feet, pretending as if nothing had happened, but as soon as she entered the small alley, where she thought that she was out of sight, she immediately began jumping up and down and grimacing in pain. "Who is this little girl? What a mischievous little bundle of joy she is." The old man chuckled. "She's my young master's unofficial disciple, and she's indeed a very mischievous little girl," Julien replied. "I've heard much about you, esteemed senior," Zheng Dafeng said as he cupped his fist in a respectful salute. The old man returned his salute as he replied, "You're far too kind, brother Dafeng. In our circle my title is Footlong Spear, and my alternate title is Young Ascended Immortal. Which celestial maiden do you currently admire the most?" "That would be heroine He Lian of the Invincible Divine Fist sect," Zheng Dafeng replied with a serious expression. "Your taste is rather mediocre, brother Dafeng," the old man scoffed. It was clear from this brief exchange that these two did not walk the same path, and Zheng Dafeng harumphed coldly as he moved his little stool several meters away. The old man returned the display of hostility, moving his own wicker chair away a little before sitting back down on it. Julien was crouched down on his haunches between the stool and the wicker chair, paying no heed to what was happening around him as he continued reading with single-minded focus. The book that he was holding was an extremely expensive one that had been printed by an immortal sect, and the beautiful women drawn on its pages were capable of moving. It really is a huge travesty that celestial maiden Su Jia had to fall from grace right at the height of her prime, Zheng Dafeng sighed. The old man's eyes lit up slightly upon hearing this, but he still didn't want to engage in a conversation with Zheng Dafeng in light of their conflicting opinions on He Lian. However, he was certainly very tempted to speak up. After all, Su Jia had once been one of the top 2 celestial maidens under the heavens in the eyes of himself, and handsome chivalrous young man Zheng Dafeng stroked his own chin as he mused. "Some years ago, I was fortunate enough to have been able to see celestial maiden He of Divine Edict sect in person. At the time, she was walking elegantly through a forest with her white deer in tow. Thinking back now, I was but a few steps away from her." The old man was unable to remain silent any longer, and he turned to Zheng Dafeng as he conceded in a sheepish voice, "Now that I think about it, heroine He Lian is also a fine choice, brother Dafeng." Zheng Dafeng picked up his little stool and trudged back to the medicinal shop without a word. The old man was silent for a long while, then suddenly slammed a fist down onto the palm of his other hand in frustration as he sighed. "Brother Dafeng has clearly seen far more of this world than I have. A fool like me should have never been so rude as to criticize his tastes. Now that I've irked brother Dafeng, I'm one step further away from celestial maiden He. Otherwise, if I could have met celestial maiden He through brother Dafeng, then I would be able to boast about the encounter to no end when I meet with handsome chivalrous young man in the Invincible Divine Fist sect. Even he would have no choice but to concede his inferiority to me then." Julien gave a half-hearted response while continuing to read his book. The old man laid back against his wicker chair as he sighed. "The peach blossoms of this world are so fickle and elusive. Who can pluck down such a prized flower and plant it upon their own heart?" "That's very deep and profound of you, senior," Julien praised him, finally raising his head from the book. The old man nodded in response. "This is a quote that I heard from handsome chivalrous young man." He's a man of extraordinary literary talent. He can sometimes be a little crass with his words when arguing with others, but such profound quotes often escape his lips as if by second nature. If not for that, I wouldn't have anywhere near as much respect for him as I do. Julien wet his fingertip with his own saliva, then turned over a page as he nodded and said, I'll be sure to pay this esteemed senior a visit if the opportunity presents itself. If you don't mind me asking, when are you going to be making your breakthrough to the Vajrabhati tier? And do you need me to watch over you as you make the breakthrough? The old man suddenly asked. There's no need for that, senior, Julien replied with a shake of his head. With my young master watching over me, I'm sure everything will go smoothly. Your young master sounds like an exceptional man, the old man mused with a nod. Julien suddenly closed his book, then asked, May I ask if you're an unpolished jade tier cultivator from some powerful immortal sect, senior? You're a little off the mark there, the old man replied in an ambiguous manner, and Julien didn't ask any further questions. Knowing too much was often not a good thing, and it could hurt the bond that they currently shared. Chen Ping'an was standing behind the counter, where the piece of dragon-slaying platform had already been whittled down to a thin scrap by 1st and 15th. Chen Ping'an had no intention of being stingy here. Once this piece was used up, he was going to bring out an even larger one. Zheng Dafeng set his little stool down outside the entrance of the shop, and even though he had already witnessed the pair of flying swords eating away at the piece of dragon-slaying platform countless times, he still couldn't help but be stunned as he remarked, These two little things eat up even more money than your golden sweet wine Dao robe. Are gold essence copper coins no longer being produced? Chen Ping'an asked. Zhang Dafeng leaned against the counter, looking down at the mesmerizing sight of the two flying swords raising sparks over the piece of dragon-slaying platform as he nodded in confirmation. Jewel's small world has already fallen, so gold essence copper coins have been made redundant, and it only makes sense that they're not being forged anymore. At his point, even if you give them to the old man for free, he won't accept them. All I know is that gold essence copper coins are more precious than grain rain coins, but I don't know why and by how much. How many grain rain coins can a gold essence copper coin be exchanged for? Chen Ping'an asked. Instead of answering Chen Ping'an's question, Zheng Dafeng raised one of his own. You don't know how gold essence copper coins are forged, right? The primary material required to craft them is the fragments of shattered godly bodies of mountain and river gods. The secondary materials are just as difficult to obtain, and the end result are the three types of gold essence copper coins, good fortune coins, greeting spring coins, and offering coins. The fortune of the Great Li Empire has always been quite stable, and illegitimate temples have always been extremely rare, and that's why gold essence copper coins are particularly expensive to purchase. In contrast, it can be very cheap to purchase godly body fragments from other places. Many immortal sects and clans will actively hunt down illegitimate mountain and river gods, and if there aren't enough illegitimate temples for them to eradicate, then they'll pressure some mortal empires into stripping some legitimate mountain and river gods of their official titles, thereby giving them an illegitimate status so that they can be hunted down. Even if certain mortal empires are unwilling to comply, there are still ways to secure godly body fragments. For example, some immortal powers will hire some itinerant cultivators to do their dirty work for them, rewarding them with some mediocre immortal techniques and treasures in exchange for godly body fragments. The cost required to produce a gold essence copper coin through such underhanded means may not even be worth as much as a single grain rain coin, but if the emperor of the Great Li Empire were to purchase gold essence copper coins from the outside world, then a single one could set him back as many as 7 or 8 grain rain coins. Are there currently any more gold essence copper coins left in the world? Chen Ping'an asked. That's hard to say, Zheng Dafeng replied. If anyone were to go around buying gold essence copper coins now, it would immediately be apparent that it's an integral item for their cultivation, so any prospective sellers would be sure to raise their prices to unprecedented heights. Chen Ping'an heaved a faint sigh as he massaged his own temples. He was one of the few people in this day and age who still needed gold essence copper coins. Worse still, he didn't just need a few. Even a few pouches wouldn't necessarily be enough to satisfy his needs. Quit looking so sad. You need to bid farewell to this year with a smile on your face, Zheng Dafeng scolded. Chen Ping'an smiled and nodded in response. Even though this was the final day of the year, There was still no end in sight to the suffering of Parasol Leaf Sect, much to the despair of its disciples. Zuoyu was still roaming through the sect, easily destroying all of the mountain and river fortune that he encountered with his unmatched sword qi. Wreaking destruction was a very simple matter, but it was extremely difficult for all of the golden core and nascent tier cultivators trailing along behind him to gather the scattered spiritual energy and repair the damage that he had done. Only by sacrificing their own cultivation bases could they slightly speed up the recovery process, thereby preventing the spiritual energy from seeping out of the sect. However, if these all-important earth immortals were to sacrifice too much of their cultivation base, then that would also negatively impact the foundation of the sect. Parasol Leaf Sect was once a blessed land with the most abundant spiritual energy on the entire continent not too long ago. But as Zuoyu continued to make the sect suffer the consequences of Du Mao's actions, even the lowliest of disciples in the sect had come to realize that Parasol Leaf Sect was facing the most dire crisis in its entire history. What was most perplexing to them was that Du Mao, who was considered a god in the sect, hadn't appeared even once to confront Zuoyu. Up to this point, the only action that had been taken against him was that assassination attempt and the time that the sect leader had approached him to try and de-escalate the situation. This was nothing short of a calamity for the sect, yet Du Mao, the most powerful qi refiner on the entire continent, seemed to be determined to turn a blind eye. However, the vast majority of qi refiners on Parasol Leaf Continent were still of the opinion that as soon as Du Mao made an appearance, he would be able to crush Zuoyu with ease, so in their eyes, Zuoyu's days were numbered. Almost all of the major cultivating powers, empires and powerful clans on Parasol Leaf Continent were keeping a close eye on the unfolding situation in Parasol Leaf Sect. Following Zhang Shangzhen's visit, more and more Earth Immortals had begun arriving at Parasol Leaf Sect, doing their best to conceal their own auras while observing the unfolding scene from afar. They were all unleashing their immortal abilities to examine the changing fortunes of Parasol Leaf Sect, and initially, no one dared to believe that a single swordsman would be able to inflict such severe wounds on the monolithic beast that was Parasol Leaf Sect. In a battle between two empires in the mortal world, if one side were to suffer as much damage as Parasol Leaf Sect already had, then that could already be considered a crushing defeat. This entire time Zuoyu didn't take a single life. In fact, he barely even used his sword unless it was to break through barriers or strike down certain obstacles. However, it was apparent to everyone that the disciples of Parasol Leaf Sect were having their spirits crushed more and more by the day. Over the past 1,000 years, all of the disciples of Parasol Leaf Sect had a sense of unmatched confidence that bolstered their Tao hearts. This confidence stemmed from the untouchable position that the sect had established for itself over its long history, and that was why the disciples of Parasol Leaf Sect were able to make far faster progress in their cultivation compared with other qi refiners. If a disciple of Parasol Leaf Sect ever encountered an opponent that they couldn't defeat, then all they had to do was declare that they were from Parasol Leaf Sect, and they would be able to insult their opponent to their heart's content without any fear of retaliation. If any Parasol Leaf Sect disciple were ever wronged by someone else, then their fellow disciples would immediately band together to confront the culprits and claim their heads without any qualms. Over time, the disciples of Parasol Leaf Sect had all developed very headstrong and unyielding personalities, willing to fight enemies to the death, and countless disciples in the history of the sect had met their demise with smiles on their faces. If Du Mao or even the sect leader had rallied the sect's disciples against Zuoyu on the first day that he had descended upon Parasol Leaf Sect, then at the very least, half of the sect's disciples would have been willing to lay down their lives to confront him. Of course, they would have only been throwing their lives away in futility, but nevertheless, they would have done so without any hesitation. However, at this point everyone's mindset had completely changed. All they could do was pray that Du Mao would be able to finally make an appearance to strike down Zuoyu, and at the same time, they couldn't help but wonder what exactly their sect had done to incur the wrath of such an almighty swordsman. Why was it that Du Mao had shut himself in Parasol Leaf's small world like a cowardly turtle? What had Parasol Leaf Sect done to deserve such a catastrophic calamity? In the past, the disciples of Parasol Leaf Sect were accustomed to being domineering and unreasonable with others, employing a policy of might is right. Only now that they were getting a taste of their own medicine did they come to realize just how bitter a pill it was to swallow. In reality, Zhang Shangzhen had never left. Instead, He was on the summit of a mountain hundreds of kilometers away, enjoying some fine wine with a nascent tier swordsman that he was on very good terms with. The swordsman shook his head with a smile as he remarked, "Most of Parasol Leaf Sect's foundation has already collapsed." "Don't say that. Du Mao is an Ascension tier cultivator, so if he can defeat this sword immortal, then the sect still has a chance of surviving this ordeal. On top of that, if he can defeat such a formidable foe, then the sect's reputation would also be elevated to unprecedented heights." Zhang Shangzhen chuckled, playing devil's advocate. However, he then burst into laughter as he chortled, "That's what I would say if I was delusional. Du Mao is completely screwed. Our sect leader just informed me that Du Mao's bonded celestial weapon, his sword-devouring arc, was smashed into pieces over an old dragon city, and his young soul avatar was also claimed by someone else. Right now, he's nothing more than an immortal tier cultivator, and even then, his cultivation base is shaky at best. Our sect leader is ecstatic, and he says that the sect is going to take 10% less of a cut from the Cloud Cave blessed land for the next 500 years. Sword immortals Wu Yu, esteemed immortal Chun, you two really are my lucky stars. If you two were here right now, I would kneel down and kowtow 500 times in a row to you without any hesitation, and even that won't be enough to express my gratitude." Zhang Shangzhen was pounding the stone table with his fist while chortling with glee, putting on a display of epitomic schadenfreude. "What do you think the Parasol Leaf Sect is going to do next?" the nascent tier swordsman asked. "Hold on, let me laugh for a bit longer. I can't stop now," Zhang Shangzhen replied as he wiped away the tears that were flowing from his eyes. The old swordsman could only give a resigned smile. Zhang Shangzhen, Lu Feng, and the old swordsman were old friends who had known one another for a very long time. After finally reining in his laughter, Zhang Shangzhen replied, "What else can they do?" Du Mao had no choice but to make a desperate final roll of the dice. He's the one at fault, so he can't reason with Zui Yu, and he certainly won't be able to defeat Zui Yu even with the help of all of the unpolished jade tier cultivators of the sect. If Zui Yu is determined not to let Parasol Leaf Sect off the hook, then by my estimates, it will only take him a year to completely raze the sect to the ground. Under normal circumstances, the Confucian Academy would have already intervened long before things got this bad, but they haven't done that, so what does that tell us? It tells us that Parasol Leaf Sect is at fault. Even though Zui Yu forced his way into Parasol Leaf Sect's territory, he hasn't taken a single life, and all of his actions are justified. So the Academy on Parasol Leaf Continent and even the Confucian schools on Middle-earth Divine Continent are powerless to do anything to him. It's always said that an intellectual kills without incurring any bloodshed. This is a perfect demonstration of that. The old swordsman mused. Zhang Shangzhen cast his gaze toward Parasol Leaf Sect, and even from hundreds of kilometers away, he could see that the mountain and water fortune of the sect were beginning to display signs of murkiness. Even though Zhang Shangzhen was more than happy to see Parasol Leaf Sect suffer such a terrible fate, he still couldn't help but feel a sense of melancholy at the self-inflicted tragedy that had befallen Du Mao. There's no way out for Du Mao aside from depleting all of the spiritual energy in the Parasol Leaf small world in one fell swoop to help himself forcibly ascend. If he can successfully ascend, then he'll have earned himself a spot in the heavens, and according to the rules laid down by the etiquette sage, the Confucian Academy will have to look after Parasol Leaf Sect in his stead for a very long time. If that happens, then unless Wei Yu is willing to pit himself against the entire Confucian orthodoxy, he'll have no choice but to relent. Zhang Shangzhen joined his palms together, then raised them high above his own head as he closed his eyes and prayed. Please, 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 great sword immortals Wa, please make sure you don't let Du Mao survive this ordeal. The nascent tier swordsman stroked his own beard with a look of schadenfreude in his eyes. You always like to look down on swordsmen, don't you, Du Mao? You're always going around insulting all of the swordsmen who've fallen by your hands, so how does it feel to be reduced to a cowardly turtle by a swordsman? Why don't you come out of your shell? If you dare? On the final day of the year, at around dusk, Parasol Leaf small world that had been under the control of Parasol Leaf Sect for countless years was partially revealed on the summit of the ancestral mountain. It was like a spectacular mirage, but it quickly began to waver before shattering altogether. The fragments of the small world flew away to all parts of majestic world like radiant asteroids, and some of them faded away into nothingness, while others pierced into space, flying to unknown destinations. After that, Du Mao's physical body began to gradually fade away on the mountain summit. All that remained was his Yin soul, which had transformed into a golden Tao manifestation. After absorbing the vast majority of the spiritual energy in Parasol Leaf's small world, the golden Tao manifestation had become enormous, standing at tens of thousands of meters tall atop the summit of the ancestral mountain. Even though it was still technically a Qi refiner's golden Tao manifestation, it was giving off radiant five-colored light. The golden Tao manifestation reached up into the sky with both hands, then abruptly brought his hands apart outward, as if it were tearing apart the very heavens of the majestic world. A massive rift appeared in the sky, within which arcs of purple lightning were flashing incessantly, and a series of mountainous figures flashed past in an instant. There was what appeared to be a skeletal flood dragon soaring through the purple lightning, a giant set of golden remains that was seated with its legs crossed, a giant red claw attempting to tear the rift in the sky open even wider. All of them were horrific sights that couldn't be seen anywhere in the majestic world. Zuiyu was holding his sword in one hand while his other hand was clasped behind his back, as he slowly rose up into the air. Compared with this golden Tao manifestation, which Du Mao had attained at the cost of his own physical body, and the near-boundless spiritual energy of an entire small world, Zuiyu was made to appear no more significant than a speck of dust. After rising up into the sky, he slashed his sword horizontally through the air in a slow and languid fashion, and that was all. Zuiyu had always been of the opinion that there were only two swords that stood at the pinnacle in this world. One of those swords was the one that the scholar on Middle-earth Divine Continent had used to slice Yellow River Small World apart, while the second sword was the one in his own scabbard. The giant golden Tao manifestation had risen tens of thousands of meters up into the air, but right at this moment, a barely visible white line, as thin as a strand of hair, appeared along its waist. As it drew closer and closer to the heavens, it was separated into two parts. Its upper body was still ascending further with a look of fury and indignation in its eyes, attempting to grab onto the edges of the rift in the sky to force its way up into the heavens, while its lower body shattered into pieces. The tremendous spiritual energy that it contained returned to heaven and earth, while around a dozen or so five-colored fragments came flying down in all directions to serve as fated opportunities for others on their cultivation journeys. Zuiyu's sword had already returned to its scabbard, while the golden Tao manifestation's upper body fell back down to earth in a defeated manner. It was like a resplendent shooting star that was dissipating in the sky. Zuiyu took a glance at the rift in the sky, then turned and sped toward the vast sea between Parasol Leaf Continent and Eastern Treasured Vial Continent. Not long after flying out to sea, he stopped in his tracks. "Why didn't you ascend?" the scholarly sage asked. Zuiyu offered no response. The two of them were separated by only a few meters, and the scholarly sage pointed up at the rift in the sky that Du Mao had forcibly torn open as he yelled in a furious voice, "Why didn't you take this opportunity to leave this world? Do you really want to die here?" Zuiyu lowered his head and offered no response. This time, the scholarly sage didn't jump up to slap him on the head. Instead, a sullen look appeared on his face as he sighed. "Go. I know you've always wanted to go to Stalactite Mountain and the Sword Chi Great Wall. Go on then. If you're determined to make me sad, then there's nothing I can do to stop you." Disciple Zuiyu bids farewell to his teacher. Zuiyu declared as he extended a deep bow. The scholarly sage gave him a dismissive wave, unable to muster up another word. Zuiyu turned to depart, but instead of flying away, he walked away one step at a time, as if he were reluctant to part with his teacher. "You accepted a great disciple in my junior brother, teacher," Zuiyu said. "Get out of here," the scholarly sage snapped, then turned around as well. The two of them had their backs facing each other, and one remained standing on the spot, while the other continued to walk away. All of a sudden, the scholarly sage began scratching his own head as some distant memories surfaced in his mind. Back then, he was still just an impoverished no-name scholar. His first disciple, Cui Chan, was from a wealthy clan, but he remained an impoverished scholar even after taking Cui Chan under his wing. His second and third disciples weren't terribly wealthy. At the time, his three disciples had gotten along quite well, and those were the happiest days that he had spent with them. But after that, all of them grew up one by one. "I've never told you this, Zuiyu, but compared with your swordsmanship, I think you're an even better scholar," the scholarly sage said in a quiet voice. Suyu continued to walk away without pause as he replied, "It's all because you taught me well, teacher." On the final day of the year, it was customary to write up new couplets to replace the ones from the year just past. Many sheets of blank red paper for writing couplets had already been purchased, and a total of 4 couplets had to be replaced, 1 at the entrance of the shop, and 1 each for the 3 rooms in the backyard of the shop. Chen Ping'an, Pei Qian, Zheng Dafeng, and Lu Baixiang each wrote a set of couplets, copying directly from a small brochure of generic couplets sold at the market without bothering to make any innovations. Chen Ping'an's couplets had impeccable, textbook handwriting, Lu Baixiang's were very graceful and free-flowing, and Zheng Dafeng's couplets were also quite exceptional. Pei Qian volunteered to write a set of couplets herself, and she did so very diligently, but the outcome wasn't what she had hoped for. Zhu Lian was constantly shaking his head at the sight of her handwriting, and even Wei Xian praised her for her efforts but admitted that the results were rather lackluster. Pei Qian was also feeling rather sheepish, but much to her relief, Chen Ping'an told her that couplets were only written for good luck, so there was no need to be overly pedantic on the quality of the handwriting. Pei Qian, Wei Xian, and Sui Yubian were responsible for putting up the couplets, while Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng gave them instructions from the sidelines. Having already done a rather lackluster job writing her couplets, Pei Qian was determined to redeem herself by making absolutely certain that her couplets were plastered straight, and before long, she was already sweating profusely. In the end, it was only after Sui Yubian told Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng to shut their mouths that Pei Qian was able to get the job done. The spring characters were all written by Chen Ping'an, while the fortune characters were all written by Zheng Dafeng. Zhu Lian spent close to the entire afternoon cooking up the final meal of the year, with Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian helping him prepare certain ingredients. During this time, Sui Yubian paid a visit to the kitchen, then stood at the entrance for a while before departing. In the end, Zhu Lian prepared a delectable feast that had a good balance of both meat and vegetable dishes, and the 2 main dishes consisted of a braised fish, which heralded a year of excess, and a pot full of slow-cooked pig trotters. Chen Ping'an and Zhu Lian were seated on the bench near the door, and the Zhao clan Insol was also invited to join them at the table, but he refused. Complementing the fine meal was a jar of the finest osmanthus wine produced by the Fan clan's Osmanthus Island. It was extremely fragrant, with a delectable flavor and a sweet aftertaste. Chen Ping'an could tell that Pei Qian was dying to get a taste of the wine. She had been working very hard putting up her couplets and helping out in the kitchen, and the osmanthus wine wasn't particularly strong, so Chen Ping'an poured out a small amount for her into a cup, roughly around 2 to 3 sips worth. However, he also warned her that she was only getting this treat due to the fact that it was a special occasion, and that she would be severely punished if she dared to try and drink wine any other time. Under Chen Ping'an's insistence, Zheng Dafeng was the first one to begin eating, and only after that did everyone dig into the meal. On top of that, he also insisted that Zheng Dafeng propose a toast to everyone and deliver a brief address. Zheng Dafeng normally had extremely thick skin, but now that he was being put on the spot, he was suddenly very shy, and in the end, he could only mumble something about wishing everyone a safe and prosperous new year. After his address was delivered, Pei Qian was finally able to take her first sip of osmanthus wine, and her eyes immediately lit up. A look of bliss befitting a child of her age appeared on her face. It was incredible to her that there was such a delicious drink in this world. All of a sudden, it occurred to her that there were some perks to growing up, after all. At the very least, she would be able to drink wine to her heart's content once she became an adult. The final meal of the year was a lively and rowdy affair, and neither Zheng Dafeng nor Chen Ping'an spoke much about Jewel's Small World and Dragon Spring Prefecture. Instead, Zheng Dafeng asked some questions about the interesting people and events of the Lotus Flower-blessed land. He was very intrigued by the 4 picture scroll martial artists, as well as Ding Ying, who was the most powerful figure in the Lotus Flower-blessed land before Chen Ping'an. He was also quite interested in Jiang Shangzhen, so Chen Ping'an spoke about some of his past interactions with this otherworldly immortal. On this subject, Zheng Dafeng brought up some secrets pertaining to various small worlds, and only then was Jewel's Small World mentioned. Generally speaking, the 10 large worlds and the 36 small worlds were considered to be blessed paradises as they harbored far more spiritual energy than all other worlds. All of these worlds had faded opportunities left behind by ancient immortals who either passed away or successfully ascended, thereby making these places extremely sought after by all cultivators. For example, Parasol Leaf's small world of Parasol Leaf sect had been claimed solely by Du Mao, and he had only been distributing a tiny amount of the benefits that he was reaping from the small world to the other upper 5 tiers cultivators of the sect. However, there were also some exceptions to this norm, examples of which included the Dao ancestors' Lotus Flower small world, which was adjacent to the Lotus Flower blessed land, and of course there was also Jewel's small world. The latter wasn't all that abundant in spiritual energy, nor was it renowned for having a vast array of natural treasures. Instead, the allure of Jewel's small world lied in the exceptional cultivation aptitude of the small town's residents. Elsewhere in Majestic World, it was extremely difficult for any Earth immortal to find a suitable disciple. It was truly a task akin to finding a needle in a haystack. Even if one were to stumble upon a prospective disciple with exceptional aptitude, they may not be suited to the Earth immortal's cultivation arts or possess lackluster personality traits. Hence, it was often the case that Earth immortals would embark on long journeys to search for disciples, only to return disappointed. In contrast, in Jewel's small world, there were many unpolished gems with sufficient aptitude to reach the middle 5 tiers, a level of aptitude that wasn't necessarily guaranteed even for the offspring of a pair of immortals. After the meal, everyone changed into new clothes. Initially, Wei Xian was rather resistant to the idea of wearing new clothes, saying that new clothes always felt stiff and comfortable, and he tried to get away with wearing his imperial robe instead. However, he was unable to stand Pei Qian's nagging, and he reluctantly put on some new clothes and boots. For this special occasion, Chen Ping'an had also taken off his golden sweet wine robe and changed into a long azure robe chosen for him by Pei Qian and Sui Yubian. Chen Ping'an also gave Pei Qian and the 4 picture scroll martial artists some New Year's money, consisting of a single snowflake coin each, held in a red paper envelope. Pei Qian was aware that a snowflake coin was worth 1,000 taels of silver, and she was ecstatic. The 4 picture scroll martial artists also accepted their red packets, but they weren't as ecstatic as Pei Qian was. After that, a vigil was held to welcome the new year. In the end, only Chen Ping'an, Zheng Dafeng, and Pei Qian stayed up the entire night, sitting around the fireplace until daybreak. Chen Ping'an had one leg crossed over the other, and the little lotus spirit was sitting on the back of his foot. As Chen Ping'an swayed his leg back and forth, the little lotus spirit bounced up and down on the back of his foot, and it was thoroughly enjoying itself. Chen Ping'an didn't dare to drink too much of the basic refinement medicinal wine in his sword-nurturing gourd. Instead, he and Zheng Dafeng only drank 1/4 of a liter of osmanthus wine each. Zheng Dafeng chatted about many of Chen Ping'an's peers from the small town, including Ma Kuxuan, Song Jisin, Zhao Yao, and Lin Shui, and he also spoke about some of the children younger than Chen Ping'an, such as Li Baoping and Gu Can. He told Chen Ping'an that he had never even expected Chen Ping'an to survive, let alone reach his current heights. Pei Qian had actually already fallen asleep at some point in the night, so she didn't hear all of these stories about Jewel's small world. Zheng Dafeng asked Chen Ping'an about his bonded porcelain, to which Chen Ping'an smiled and replied that it was a white porcelain paperweight roughly in the form of a hornless dragon, and that he had kept a few broken fragments of the paperweight in the clay pot in the corner of his ancestral residence on Clay Vase Alley. Even if it had been completed, it wouldn't have been offered up to the imperial clan of the Great Li Empire. Instead, it would have mostly likely become part of a certain immortal manor's secret collection. According to the old sword immortal from the Sword Chi Great Wall, Clay Vase Alley originally possessed the aptitude to become an earth immortal. Zheng Dafeng didn't speak any further on this subject, and Chen Ping'an didn't insist on dwelling on it either. Zheng Dafeng pointed outside as he revealed, Old Man Zhao is the ancestor of Zhao Yao's branch of the Zhao clan in Jewel's small world. After he passed away, the old man gathered his soul and made him into a Yin soul. If he's lucky, then perhaps he can become the god of a certain mountain in the Great Li Empire someday. He definitely won't be able to emulate Wei Bo's meteoric rise and ascend to become the northern mountain god. At least there's a chance that he could become a mountain god of the same caliber as Gu Can's father. I figured that out for myself, Chen Ping'an replied with a nod. Qi Jingchun had left behind 3 drafts of spring wind, one each for Chen Ping'an, Zhao Yao and Song Jisin. Zhao Yao wasn't able to keep his most precious spring seal, but Qi Jingchun had said that he wasn't disappointed about that. Initially, Chen Ping'an had been rather perplexed to hear this. Given Qi Jingchun's personality, he definitely wasn't feeling that way because he hadn't had any high hopes for Zhao Yao to begin with. In fact, compared with Song Jisen, Qi Jingchun actually held Zhao Yao in somewhat higher regard. Thinking back now, Chen Ping'an realized that Qi Jingchun had most likely been hoping that by losing the spring seal, Zhao Yao would be able to cast aside all ties that the two of them had. From there onward, he could establish something on his own or turn to another branch of teachings. Perhaps that would allow him to live out a safe and peaceful life, and that was a very good outcome in Qi Jingchun's eyes. Chen Ping'an didn't feel like he could be as open-minded as Qi Jingchun. Perhaps he would be able to in the future after reading more books and meeting more people, but at the very least he definitely couldn't in his current state. Zheng Dafeng also revealed a small secret pertaining to Ma Kuxuan. He told Chen Ping'an that Ma Kuxuan's white cat was a very special creature, at least on par with the likes of the golden carp in Gao Xian's Dragon King basket, the fire dragon bracelet worn by Ruan Xiu, Zhao Yao's wooden dragon carving, Gu Qian's little catfish and Song Jisen's four-legged snake. However, in contrast with these five, the white cat had made its way into Jewel's small world in secret, and it would only ever accept Ma Kuxuan as its master. Chen Ping'an told Zheng Dafeng about his two battles against Ma Kuxuan, the first in the Immortal Tomb, and the second was on the streets of colorful Garment Nation. Zheng Dafeng was very amused to hear about this, and he didn't take it too seriously. He told Chen Ping'an that roughly once every 500 to 1,000 years in Jewel's small world, a pair of sworn enemies or lifelong friends would emerge. An example of friends were the two ancestors of the Chao clan and the Yuan clan of the Great Li Empire. This time, perhaps it was Chen Ping'an's turn to forge a lifelong rivalry with Ma Kuxuan. Chen Ping'an turned to look outside, and he discovered that the first morning of the new year had arrived. The same time last year he was still stumbling around the lotus flower-blessed land like a lost soul, and thinking back that felt like a lifetime ago. As soon as Pei Qian woke up, she immediately rushed outside into the alley to set off some firecrackers. Perhaps it was because she really had become wiser with the passing of a year, but prior to setting off the firecrackers, she made a very thoughtful display of asking the Zhao clan Yin soul if he would be frightened by the sound of the firecrackers, in response to which the Yin soul smiled and reassured her that he wouldn't. As he listened to the firecrackers going off in the alley, Zheng Dafeng suddenly said, "When Pei Qian's by your side you can restrain her and keep her in check, but what happens after she leaves you?" Chen Ping'an considered the question momentarily, then replied, "I'll do my best to teach her what's right and what's wrong before she leaves me. Only then will she have a moral compass to guide her, and she won't need to have me tell her what to do all the time." Chen Ping'an drew a circle on the ground with his foot as he spoke, then continued, "Right now she's still young, so I have to make rules for her and keep her confined in a little circle. She can do whatever she wants as long as she remains in the circle, but if she strays out of the circle, then I have to reprimand her and tell her what she did wrong. This has to be a slow process, and I can't afford to grow impatient. She's only 10 years old right now, and I think she's already doing quite well for her age." "Can she compare with back when you were 10? Zheng Dafeng asked with a smile. "Why compare her to me?" Chen Ping'an asked with a smile. "Pei Qian is Pei Qian, and Chen Ping'an is Chen Ping'an. Pei Qian is very fortunate to have met you," Zheng Dafeng sighed. Chen Ping'an turned to Zheng Dafeng then asked, "Aren't you also very fortunate to have met me? I've only passed through Old Dragon City twice and I've already had to serve as both your Dao mentor and your Dao guardian. At this rate, I'll be too afraid to come back to Old Dragon City ever again. You did alright as my Dao mentor, but I have to say you really failed in your job as my Dao guardian," Zheng Dafeng jibed. Chen Ping'an burst into laughter upon hearing this, cupping his fist in a mock apology as he said, "Please forgive me, my capabilities are somewhat limited as a mere 5th-tier martial artist." Zheng Dafeng rolled his eyes in response, then sighed to himself. "How am I ever going to find a wife?" Pei Qian was walking around carrying a feather duster on her shoulder, proclaiming that she was giving her hiking pole a break. As soon as she stepped out into the backyard, she immediately began dishing out well wishes to everyone. She wished Wei Xian luck in finding a pretty wife, she wished Liu Baixiang good fortune in improving his Go skills, encouraging him to break into the top 100 Go players in the world, She wished for Sui Yubian to never grow wrinkles and to grow younger with each passing day. She wished for Zhu Lian to improve his cooking skills even further. She wished for the Zhao clan soul to make rapid progress in his cultivation base, so that he would be able to take her to fly up in the sky. And she wished Zheng Dafeng a profitable year for his shop. Finally, Pei Qian wished for a prosperous year for Qian Ping'an, one in which he would be constantly flooded by gold, silver, and powerful treasures. Clearly, she no longer wanted to be a burden to everyone in this new year. Perhaps Pei Qian's luck had finally turned, but while she was only able to speak bad things into existence in the past, she seemed to have now become a clairvoyant of good fortune, and the good fortune that she spoke of manifested itself on the very first day of the year. According to the customs and traditions of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, the first day of the year was one that was reserved purely for relaxation and recreation, and no work was to be done on this day. However, Fan Junmao had arrived at the dust medicinal shop early in the morning, and aside from asking Qian Ping'an when he was going to return to the Sea of Clouds to refine his bonded item, she also brought him 3 pouches of gold essence copper coins, 1 pouch of each of the 3 varieties. In total, there were around 3 dozen gold essence copper coins, all of which had been provided by the Emperor of the Great Li Empire. Furthermore, he had promised that there was still going to be more to come. As the army of the Great Li Empire continued to make its southward march, all illegitimate mountain and river gods that they encountered, and even some legitimate mountain and river gods and that refused to submit to the Great Li Empire, would have their godly bodies destroyed, thereby providing the godly body fragments required to refine gold essence copper coins. Qian Ping'an turned to Zheng Dafeng with a perplexed expression, and the latter was just as perplexed as he asked, "Aren't gold essence copper coins no longer being forged?" That's exactly why the Song clan is including them in their compensation. How are they going to show off their sincerity to you if they don't offer up something special? Fan Junmao scoffed. There's no way the Great Li Empire would have gone this far unless the old man is personally exerting pressure upon the emperor. It would be far better for the Great Li Empire to use these godly fragments to bolster the godly bodies of the other 3 great mountain gods. Qian Ping'an nodded in agreement with this. A perplexed look then appeared on Zheng Dafeng's face as he mused, but that doesn't seem like something the old man would do. An exasperated look appeared on Fan Junmao's face. She revealed, "Not long ago, an intercontinental ship traveling southward from northern Complete Reed Continent passed by Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, and as it did so, a man came falling out of the sky before crashing down onto the ground. At this point, just about everyone in the northern region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent has heard that there's another 10th-tier martial artist on the continent aside from Song Chongjing. That's definitely Li Air. I wonder when he'll arrive in Old Dragon City," Zheng Dafeng mused. Assuming that he's taking the ship from the ferry station in Dragon Spring Prefecture, as long as he's willing to spend the money to speed the ship along, he should be arriving in the next few days, Fan Junmao said. So he's gone from northern Complete Reed Continent to the Great Li Empire in the northernmost region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, and now he's coming to Old Dragon City in the southernmost region of the continent. This sure has been a long journey for him, Zheng Dafeng chuckled. The smile on his face then faded slightly as he asked, "How are things going in Parasol Leaf Sect?" A cold sneer appeared on Fan Junmao's face as she scoffed. None of the spineless earth immortals of Old Dragon City dare to travel to Parasol Leaf Continent to gather information. Eastern Treasured Vile Continent has always been below Parasol Leaf Continent, and Parasol Leaf Sect is the most powerful and domineering immortal power on Parasol Leaf Continent, so no one dares to encroach upon its authority. Perhaps the Fu clan is able to get some insider information on what's happening, but the other major clans of the city may as well be blind as far as Parasol Leaf Sect is concerned. Having said that, my guess is that Parasol Leaf Sect is in serious trouble right now. Otherwise, Fu Qi wouldn't have offered up that old dragon Rainbringer as compensation, in addition to something that even I didn't think of. However, Fu Qi told me that he still needs to discuss this matter with the Fu clan's ancestral hall, but he'll do his best to secure everyone's approval. The item will be delivered to you by me, whenever you decide to leave Old Dragon Rainbringer. Why don't you two take a guess at what it is? Given Pei Qian's recent track record of speaking good things into existence, Qian Ping'an hurriedly called her into the yard, then briefly told her about the Fu clan's situation before urging, "Take a guess at what it could be. Be as ambitious as possible." Pei Qian thought about it carefully, then asked in a timid manner, "Could it be a pseudo-celestial tool?" Fan Junmao was rendered speechless, while Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng both burst into laughter. On the 5th day of the first month, the old man with the title of Footlong Spear was once again hanging out at the dust medicinal shop, and he was snacking on some sunflower seeds while chatting with Pei Qian. It seemed that the two of them were having a bragging contest. On this day, the shop was visited by another guest. A short yet well-built man made his way into the alley, and as he passed by, even the old man couldn't help but take an extra glance at him. This man was a far rarer sight than even unpolished jade-tier cultivators. Even before the 4-picture scroll martial artists caught sight of this visitor, all 4 of them were instantly struck by a sense of inexplicable fear. It was an instinctive sense of primal fear that welled up from the bottom of their hearts, and as the visitor approached the shop, the 4 of them felt as if they were witnessing a massive flood dragon forcing its way into a tiny stream. How could such a martial artist exist in this world? In contrast, Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng were looking completely relaxed, and only after gauging their reactions were the hearts of the 4-picture scroll martial artists put at ease. Wei Xian was rubbing his hands together in anticipation, while Zhu Lian was standing ramrod straight with a fervent look in his eyes. Lu Baixiang and Sui Yubian had both looked up from the go board placed between them, and all 4 of them were waiting with bated breath. Chen Ping'an and Zheng Dafeng made their way into the shop, and the latter looked around momentarily before asking, "Your wife didn't come with you?" Li Er's face wasn't displaying much emotion as he looked at Zheng Dafeng, and he replied, "If our master didn't ask me to wait a little, I would already be at Parasol Leaf Sect by now." Zheng Dafeng scratched his own head and didn't say anything. Li Er turned to Chen Ping'an, then cupped his fist in a salute as he said, "Chen Ping'an, Li Huai has become far more mature and thoughtful after his journey with you. He's learned many things that aren't taught in books, and for that I have you to thank. Mr. Qi taught Li Huai very well. Now that Mr. Qi is gone, you've taken up the mantle and done just as stellar a job, so I should call you Mr. Chen. I have to depart today to demolish Parasol Leaf Sect's ancestral hall, so I can't waste much time here. However, before I go, I have something to say to you. Normally, I'll only use my fists if someone in my family suffers some type of injustice, but I promise that from now on all you need to do is give the word, and whoever you feel should be beaten up will be beaten up. If I hesitate even for a moment, then I'm no longer Li Huai's father." He then cupped his fist once again as he declared, "Farewell." With that he turned and departed. Following Li Er's visit, the situation in Old Dragon City was clarified even further. Even though he had only paid a brief visit to Dust Medicinal Shop, the fact that a 10th-tier martial artist had visited the shop at all was a resounding statement in itself. Perhaps the Sun, Ding, Feng, and Ho clans were still oblivious to this, but everything that was going to unfold from this point onward was essentially already decided. The forces and resources of Old Dragon City would begin moving northward, getting closer and closer to the army of the Greatly Empire, which had already established itself in the central region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. In contrast, the Fu clan, the Fan clan, and everyone in Dust Medicinal Shop was already fully aware of this. Not long after Li Er departed, some people from the Fan clan came to the shop to wish everyone a happy new year. All of them familiar faces for Chen Ping'an. Of course, Fan Junmao and Fan Er had come to visit, and they were accompanied by Aunt Gui from Osmanthus Island and her only direct disciple, Jin Su, the Osmanthus girl who had served Chen Ping'an during his time on the Osmanthus Island. There was also the Golden Courtier swordsman Ma Ji, who had trained Chen Ping'an in the way of the sword for some time. Aunt Gui very rarely set foot ashore Old Dragon City. Even though Osmanthus Island traveled back and forth between Old Dragon City and Stalactite Mountain twice every year, many people in the Fan clan's ancestral hall had never even seen her once. The old man with the title of Footlong Spear had thought that this was just going to be another uneventful day as usual, and he was saddened by the thought that perhaps he wouldn't even be able to catch a glimpse of Sui Yubian, so he was delighted to see so many women visiting the shop. He immediately began making himself useful, attending to the women diligently, bringing them beverages and snacks, and it was almost as if he had become an employee of the shop. After making her way into the shop, Aunt Gui took a glance at the old man, who just so happened to look at her at the same time, and their eyes met momentarily. Aunt Gui gave him a polite smile before looking away again. In the eyes of the old man, Aunt Gui's looks weren't particularly exceptional, but she was a very kind and elegant woman, the type that would be perfect as a wife and a mother. It was no wonder that Zhang Shangzhen's eldest son had used his ties with Jade Tablet Sect to pressure her, hoping to purchase Osmanthus Island that traveled back and forth between Old Dragon City and Stalactite Mountain from the Fan clan. Even among Earth immortals, there were vast disparities in power and aptitude. Chun Ping'an made his way into the shop to greet Aunt Gui in person. He had always been quite grateful to her, and it had nothing to do with her status or cultivation base. On the way to Stalactite Mountain, Chun Ping'an had experienced a moment of empty-mindedness during the crisis that he had suffered while passing through the Flood Dragon Trench. It was a moment in which Chun Ping'an felt as if he could see into the hearts of all those around him, and it caught him completely off guard, making him feel as if this entire world was filled with evil and ill intent. After that, he had fallen into a slight depression in his courtyard. During that dark period, he could only recall two sources of warmth and light in his life, the first of which was the artist with the Fan surname, who had drawn 3 paintings for him, and the second one was Aunt Gui, who was able to maintain a placid mental state even after witnessing so many facets of the world. Fan excused himself to pay a visit to Zheng Dafeng's room, only to be disappointed to find that the portrait of Sui Yubian was no longer there. Meanwhile, Chun Ping'an was chatting with Aunt Gui and the others in the guest hall outside. Inside his room, Zheng Dafeng cleared his throat as he said in a serious manner, "The cultivation of the mind is just as important as the training of the body, so don't go doing such unscrupulous things anymore." Fan was initially rather perplexed by Zheng Dafeng's serious demeanor, but a look of realization then immediately appeared on his face, following which he feigned an expression of shame and remorse as he said, "My artist is also partially to blame for this. My original intention was for him to create a painting of a beautiful woman in the hope that it would put you in a better mood. I know that you've always greatly admired Celestial Maiden Sui, and I've always wanted to do something for you as your disciple, so I gave my artist a description of Celestial Maiden Sui's stunning beauty in the hope that he would paint a flattering portrait of her." Zheng Dafeng was very pleased at how wise his disciple had become. As it turned out, Sui Yubian had arrived at the entrance of Zheng Dafeng's room at some point, and she sneered, "That artist of your Fan clan must truly be a miracle worker to have painted such an accurate portrait of me with just a verbal description from you." Jin Su's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. Even though she had no romantic feelings for Fan, he was still the undisputed heir to the leader of the Fan clan, and Osmanthus Island was technically already under his ownership. According to Chun Ping'an, Sui Yubian was a follower of his. To put it in a more flattering light, she was like a guest elder, but to put it more frankly, she was essentially just a servant, and in Jin Su's eyes, it was very unbecoming of a servant like her to be speaking to Fan. However, given all of the recent unrest in Old Dragon City, Aunt Gui had warned her to be very careful with her words and actions. Hence, even though she was rather displeased by Sui Yubian's disrespectful display, she didn't say anything. Even though she was Aunt Gui's only disciple, she was well aware that there was no place for her to speak in this gathering. Hence, she looked away from Sui Yubian and returned her attention to Chun Ping'an. It hadn't been all that long since they last met, but in her eyes Chun Ping'an had undergone a drastic transformation. He was no longer the little hillbilly drunkard that he once was. All of the childish immaturity about him had completely faded away, and it had been replaced by a type of calmness and tranquility. At this moment, he was dressed in a white robe with a white jade hairpin in his hair, and that familiar red wine gourd was still strapped to his waist. He had become a lot taller, and was seated in a very formal manner, yet somehow didn't appear rigid at all. He liked to establish eye contact with those that he was speaking to, and he constantly wore a relaxed and earnest smile. Jin Su then noticed the dark-skinned little girl standing beside Chun Ping'an. She had a pair of very large eyes that were quickly darting from side to side, sneaking furtive glances back and forth between Jin Su and Aunt Gui. Jin Su gave her a warm smile, and Pei Qian responded in kind. From Pei Qian's perspective, all of these beautiful big sisters, including the likes of Yao Jin and Su Yubian, had bulging money pouches. According to Zheng Dafeng, there existed a type of spirit that was very fond of moving wealth around, and Pei Qian felt like she was a human embodiment of such a spirit. Jin Su had no idea that she was going to encounter a little girl here, so she didn't bring any New Year's money with her. In contrast, Aunt Gouet was much better prepared, bringing out an intricately stitched little perfume sachet. The perfume sachet was giving off wisps of white spiritual energy, and faint glimmers of green light could be seen flashing within it. On top of that, it was giving off a fragrant aroma, and it was clear that it was no ordinary perfume sachet. Qian Ping'an was immediately able to guess that the sachet most likely contained a bonded osmanthus leaf from the ancestral tree on Osmanthus Island, and he immediately refused the gift. Pei Qian had become very observant at this point, and she could tell that Qian Ping'an didn't want her to accept this gift, so she shook her head and turned it down as well. Aunt Gouet insisted on giving the perfume sachet to Pei Qian as a first-time meeting gift, and in the end, Qian Ping'an had no choice but to relent and tell her to accept the gift. Of course, the perfume sachet was going to be in his possession for safekeeping purposes. Pei Qian accepted the perfume sachet respectfully with both hands from Aunt Gouet, then extended a bow of gratitude before wishing Aunt Gouet good health and eternal youth. Aunt Gouet was very pleased with her impeccable etiquette, and she patted Pei Qian on her little head as she told her about how Qian Ping'an already had a courtyard under his name on Osmanthus Island, and that she wanted to also give Pei Qian a little vacant courtyard on the ship by the name of the Toad Palace. Pei Qian was truly startled by this gesture. She's giving me an entire house? Could it be that all of the older women under the heavens are extremely generous? Aunt Gouet, I can't accept this. It's far too much, Qian Ping'an said with a wry smile. I'm giving the courtyard to Pei Qian. What does it have to do with you? Aunt Gouet countered with a dismissive expression. Qian Ping'an cleared his throat, then called out in a stern voice, Pei Qian! Pei Qian immediately stood up straight and declared in a tender voice, a master for a day, a father for a lifetime. The orders of my master cannot be disobeyed. Otherwise, I'll be turning my back on the virtues of loyalty and filial piety. Did you teach her that? Aunt Gouet asked as she turned to Qian Ping'an with an amused expression. Qian Ping'an was feeling thoroughly embarrassed as he replied, she must have learned this herself from all the books I've been making her transcribe every day. It's all because you taught me well, master. Pei Qian flattered, only to receive a knock on her head for her efforts. Pei Qian immediately classed her with a confused and indignant look on her face, wondering what she had done wrong. After escorting Aunt Gouet and the others out of the alley, Qian Ping'an strode along side by side with Ma Ji, asking him some questions about sword nurturing and sword refinement, and Ma Ji was happy to pass on his knowledge. On the 9th day of the first month, it was customary for all of the households of Old Dragon City to prepare flowers, candles, and vegetarian dishes to pray to the heavens for good fortune in places that aren't covered by any shelter overhead, such as skywells and on the corners of streets. Even though there were no true residents of Old Dragon City in Dust Medicinal Shop, Zhang Dafeng observed this tradition even more diligently than the citizens of Old Dragon City. He hadn't even prepared much for the turn of the year, but on this day, he personally prepared the flowers, candles, and fruits, then cooked several vegetarian dishes himself. He set up 3 incense tables of varying heights in the skywell of the backyard, then lit 3 sticks of incense before kneeling down 3 times and kowtowing 9 times. These were less formalities than what was observed by emperors when worshipping the heavens, but far beyond the formalities expected of the average person for the same occasion. The Zhao clan soul also took this very seriously, and even though he didn't offer up any incense, he observed the formalities of kneeling and kowtowing just as diligently as Zhang Dafeng did. Pei Qian was watching the two of them with an intrigued look in her eyes, while Qian Ping'an only took a single glance before looking away. This concerned certain secrets of Zhang Dafeng and the Yin soul, and even though Zhang Dafeng hadn't made any effort to hide this from Qian Ping'an, it would have been rude and intrusive for Qian Ping'an to stare. On this day, Qian Ping'an was serving as the medicinal shop's temporary shopkeeper and accountant as usual. He had already made the preparations required to refine his water seal, and so he could go up to the Sea of Clouds again soon. As for exactly which pseudo-celestial tool Fu Qi would be offering up, that was something that he was very eager to see. Ultimately, it was Du Mao and Parasol Leaf Sect's actions that had implicated the Emperor of the Great Li Empire. The Emperor of the Great Li Empire naturally wasn't going to try and make enemies out of Qian Ping'an and Zhang Dafeng, but he had clearly underestimated the sacrifice required for an Ascension tier cultivator to break the rules and leave their sect. Hence, no matter how many gold essence copper coins were offered up by the emperor of the Great Li Empire, Qian Ping'an would always feel justified in demanding more. The pouch of gold essence copper coins given to him by Zhang Dafeng way back in the day had already been devoured by the golden sweet wine robe. The jewel clasped in the mouth of the golden dragon embroidered onto the center of the robe was becoming more and more abundant with spiritual energy, and not only had the robe been restored to brand new condition, it had definitely been enhanced in the process. According to the Zhao clan Yin soul, as long as Qian Ping'an could continue to feed it more gold essence copper coins, the robe would definitely be able to become a pseudo-celestial tool. However, Qian Ping'an was rather reluctant to go that far. Gold essence copper coins were quite difficult to come by, and on top of that, Zhang Dafeng had told him that once he reached the 3 mind-tempering tiers, the immortal artifacts in his possession would only become less and less useful, to the point that they might become hindrances. On the 11th day of the first month, all of the households of Old Dragon City observed another tradition, one that mandated that no stone tools, including things like mills and mortars and pestles, could be used on this day. At this point, Pei Qian had already learned to complete her transcriptions earlier every day instead of stalling until it was right before bedtime. This was most likely a result of Qian Ping'an's daily supervision of her, as she made her transcriptions. On this day, as Pei Qian was making her transcriptions, she suddenly asked Qian Ping'an a question. The question pertained to a passage in a book, which stated that one shouldn't eat fish or kill birds during spring, leading her to wonder if that meant that one shouldn't go fishing in spring. Qian Ping'an didn't immediately answer her question. Instead, he urged Pei Qian to continue making her transcriptions, and only after she was done did Qian Ping'an give her an answer. He told her that this was a saying that encouraged people to be kind to the world around them. However, if one had to work hard just to survive, then it would be foolish of them to abide by such mantras that should only apply to those in more privileged positions. If one didn't have to worry about food for survival, then they could abide by this saying, but at the same time it would be incorrect of them to reprimand a starving person for catching fish and birds to fill their belly during spring. Only by displaying sympathy and understanding of other humans could one hope to develop empathy for the entire world. So even though this was saying laid out in a book, it was still only applicable under certain circumstances. Pei Qian nodded in response, telling Qian Ping'an that she felt like she understood what he had told her. It's fine even if you don't understand. Just remember what I've said and strive to understand it at a later date, Qian Ping'an said with a smile. I was lying to you just now, I didn't understand at all, Pei Qian revealed with a smile of her own, receiving another knock on the head for her honesty. It was another peaceful day at Dust Medicinal Shop, and Pei Qian was watching Qian Ping'an practice his 6-step walking meditation in the courtyard. All of a sudden, Qian Ping'an stopped in his tracks, then instructed Pei Qian to come into the shop with him before asking the Zhao clan Yin soul to create an isolated small world for the two of them. Only then did he begin teaching Pei Qian the mantra qi circulation route, and the changes of pace of the 18 stops technique. He then pulled out a diagram depicting a human figure with all of its acupoints marked out before pointing out the relevant acupoints to Pei Qian one by one. This was the version of the 18 stops technique that had been altered by Aoyang. Out of all of the younger generation of swordsmen in the Sword Qi Great Wall, only a small group of people, including Ning Yao, had learned the version of the 18 stops technique that had been refined by Aoyang. Pei Qian clearly wasn't going to be able to endure the physical rigors of martial arts training, so Qian Ping'an decided to teach her the 18 stops technique, which wasn't that hard on the body and mainly depended on one's sword Dao cultivation aptitude. As for how far she would be able to go down this path, Qian Ping'an didn't have any expectations at all. Pei Qian's memory was even better than Qian Ping'an's. This was something that the 4-picture scroll martial artists had realized long ago. Hence, Qian Ping'an only showed her everything twice before sending her away with the diagram to study it on her own. That same day at about dusk, Pei Qian approached Qian Ping'an with a guilty expression, telling him that she wasn't cut out for cultivation after all. Even after practicing for so long, she was only able to get her sword qi to circulate to the 3rd stop, and she was unable to make any further progress beyond that point. Qian Ping'an gave her another knock on the head as he sternly scolded her. Don't be overly ambitious when trying to learn something. Make sure to take things one step at a time. Pei Qian gave an affirmative response before rushing back to her room to continue playing with fire. She was already able to control that small current of fire, making it go wherever she wanted. It was able to race through her acupoints and meridians, and it was extremely obedient. At the moment, it was unable to make the fourth stop, but Pei Qian didn't dwell on that and simply directed the current of fire to go and play in some other acupoints. She had no idea how incredibly inferior Chen Ping'an felt when he compared his progress with hers. On the 11th day of the first month, Dust's medicinal shop welcomed a rare guest. It was Huang Ting of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. When she appeared, she spotted a certain old man squatting at the entrance of the shop and snacking on sunflower seeds. She was immediately rooted to the spot. The old man blinked urgently at her, clearly not wanting her to blow his cover, so she could only pretend to not know him, but internally, she was screaming. In terms of seniority, the old man ranked even higher than the old Heavenly Lord of Peace and Tranquility Mountain. In fact, only Du Mao could compare to him. As for cultivation base, Du Mao had met his doom, and his great Tao had completely collapsed, so it was difficult to say whether even his soul still remained. With that, the old man had become the most powerful cultivator on Parasol Leaf Continent. Jade Tablet sect hadn't done anything, yet the status of the #1 cultivating sect on Parasol Leaf Continent had fallen onto its lap, and as the sect leader, the old man's status had naturally been even further elevated. He was truly a lucky old man. Huang Ting's impression of the old man was quite neutral. After all, their personalities were so vastly different from each other's that it was difficult for her to form any concrete opinions of him. Chen Ping'an was very surprised by her visit, but she declared in a direct and straightforward manner, "By following some leads in my intuition, I found an ancient underground palace deep in an earth vein, and I was eventually able to find that dragon-locking platform inside. But that treacherous old ape was still nowhere to be found. It's as if he's vanished from Majestic World altogether." After that, I received a flying sword letter from our sect leader, telling me that there was no need to continue my search, so I returned to the sect right away. After that, we received that ancestral Hall Jade tablet from you. Our sect leader, Great Subduing Academy, and a naturalist cultivator collectively arrived at the conclusion that the culprit behind the crisis in the central region of Parasol Leaf Continent was none other than that nascent tier cultivator from our Peace and Tranquility Mountain, the one who perished while in possession of that hibiscus Dao hat. Our Peace and Tranquility Mountain is naturally extremely embarrassed by this, and our sect leader is too ashamed to come and see you, so he asked me to make a trip to Old Dragon City in the hope that I would be able to meet you before you left. I've come here with the sole purpose of delivering an apology to you. We suffered severe losses during the crisis, so we really don't have any wealth to spare at the moment. Our sect leader wanted to give you some compensation, but I convinced him not to, so if you want to blame someone, then blame me, but don't denounce our sect for being stingy. Under normal circumstances, we would never do something. A wry smile appeared on Huang Ting's face as she continued. Our sect has suffered extremely severe casualties in the process of hunting down all of the demonic beings that were set free from the well prison. I can imagine, Chen Ping'an replied with a heavy heart. A smile then suddenly appeared on Huang Ting's face as she continued. Honestly, I should count our Peace and Tranquility Mountain fortunate compared to Parasol Leaf sect. Somehow they incurred the wrath of an almighty sword immortal that cut down Du Mao right as he was trying to ascend. Not long after that, a 10th tier martial artist stormed all the way from the foot of their ancestral mountain to its summit and smashed their ancestral hall to bits. In the process, he only bothered to evade the attacks from a few of Parasol Leaf sect's unpolished Jade tier cultivators, while the attacks from all of the sect's other cultivators simply bounced off his skin. I thoroughly enjoyed watching him, and Jiang Shangzhen of Jade Tablet sect was even more ecstatic. In fact, he even went as far as to arrange for a ship to hover directly above Parasol Leaf sect, and he held a celebratory banquet on the ship as he watched the 10th tier cultivator make his way up the mountain. Chen Ping'an hurriedly took a sip of wine to help himself suppress his own astonishment. Meanwhile, Zheng Dafeng, Zhu Lian, and the old man were all sneaking furtive glances at Huang Ting. In terms of looks, Huang Ting was undisputedly one of the most stunning women of Majestic World, superior even to the likes of Sui Yubian, Fan Junmao, and Jin Su. Chen Ping'an asked Huang Ting what her plans were from here onward, to which she replied that her original intention was to explore Middle-earth Divine Continent, but her sect leader sternly forbade her from going there, threatening to hang himself if she were to go against him. Instead, He limited her options to only Eastern Treasured Vial Continent and Northern Complete Reed Continent. Huang Ting was very honest and forthright, telling Qian Ping'an that Eastern Treasured Vial Continent was simply too small for her tastes. In contrast, Northern Complete Reed Continent was teeming with swordsmen, making it a perfect place for her to hone her swordsmanship, and perhaps she would even be able to make a breakthrough to the unpolished jade tier there. She was determined not to let Wei Jin put all of the swordsmen of Parasol Leaf Continent to shame. Huang Ting was not one to waste time, and after her conversation with Qian Ping'an drew to a conclusion, she immediately prepared to depart. However, as she did so, she just so happened to spot Pei Qian practicing her swordsmanship in the yard. Peace and Tranquility Mountain still owed Qian Ping'an a massive favor, so after learning that Pei Qian was Qian Ping'an's first ever disciple, she asked Pei Qian if she wanted to learn the fastest sword and saber techniques on Parasol Leaf Continent. Pei Qian asked her if it was going to hurt, to which Huang Ting erupted into laughter and assured her that it wouldn't. Pei Qian turned to Qian Ping'an with an inquisitive look in her eyes, and the latter gave her a smile and a nod. Hence, Huang Ting stayed an extra day to teach Pei Qian a set of sword techniques and a saber technique, namely the white ape sword carrying technique and the white ape saber wielding technique. Prior to her departure, she patted Pei Qian on her little head, then reached out to squeeze her cheek while shaking her head with a forlorn expression. "You're such a smart girl, it's a pity that you're so depressing to look at." Pei Qian was absolutely distraught after hearing this, and she was in a sour mood the entire day. Even after plastering the yellow paper talisman to her own forehead, she was still feeling very sad and glum. Qian Ping'an couldn't help but be reminded of Li Baoping as he looked at Pei Qian. In the eyes of everyone in Mountain Cliff Academy, Li Baoping was a rather strange little girl. Every day, she would rush around like a cat on a hot tin roof with a little bamboo bookcase on her back, and she would go to her classes on her own, and leave on her own as well. She was always either climbing trees, mountains, and buildings, or squatting down by the lake to stare at the fish, gawking blankly at them as they swam through the water. Whenever the opportunity arose, she would leave the academy to wander aimlessly through the streets and alleys of the capital city. No matter where she went in or out of the academy, she was always on her own, cutting a rather lonesome figure from the perspective of bystanders. Despite her erratic nature, she was a very polite little girl. Whenever she encountered any of the teachers of the academy, she would always come to an abrupt halt, then extend a respectful bow and greeting before rushing away again like the wind. In the beginning, those teachers would stop and return her greeting, but by the time they opened their mouths to speak, she would already be long gone. Over time, they grew accustomed to this, and they would merely smile and shake their heads in response to her respectful greetings, no longer bothering to stop and try to speak to her. Li Baoping felt like she was having a decent time in Mountain Cliff Academy. She very rarely saw Li Huai and Lin Shuyi, as was the case with Yu Lu and Xie Xie, and even if she did meet them, there wasn't much to say between them. She no longer regarded these matters with as much importance as before ever since her conversation with Cui Dongshan on that tree branch on the mountain summit. They didn't miss Qian Ping'an much anymore, but that didn't matter in her eyes. She would just have to miss him even more to make up for them. The days passed by one after another, and before long, the first month of the year was about to go by. On the day of the Lantern Festival, Li Baoping looked at all of the red lanterns that had been hung up, and she began to miss her father, her mother, her grandpa, her brothers, and her home. Of course, she also missed her junior uncle. It had been a very long time since her junior uncle had last sent a letter to the academy, and that was a rather depressing thought for her. It was the 15th day of the first month, the day of the Lantern Festival. All of the households in Old Dragon City had hung up festive red lanterns, and the streets and alleys were packed with people. In accordance with the customs and traditions of the city, each of the 5 major clans crafted a long dragon of lanterns, which they paraded out on the streets. If one were to look down at Old Dragon City from the sea of clouds up above, they would see 5 fiery dragons roaming along set routes. Qian Ping'an asked the 4 picture scroll martial artists to accompany Pei Qian out to see the lanterns, while the Zhao clan Insol followed them in secret in case of any mishaps. Meanwhile, he and Zheng Dafeng remained in the shop, standing over at the counter. The two of them prepared a flagon of wine, 2 small porcelain wine cups, and a few dishes of snacks. Zheng Dafeng was still behaving rather strangely, and prior to taking a sip of his wine, he pulled out a willow branch and placed it against the doors of Dust Medicinal Shop, then also set down a bowl and a pair of chopsticks outside the doorstep. Chan Ping'an took a glance at his handiwork, then asked, "Is that an offering to the gods or to any wandering spirits that may be passing by?" "It's a tradition passed down by the old man," Zheng Dafeng explained with a smile. "As for exactly why this tradition is observed, the old man never told us. As his disciples, we simply carried out his instructions without asking why. There are no wandering spirits or demonic entities in Old Dragon City. With so many qi refiners in the city, the yang energy here is far too abundant. Even if some wandering spirits do somehow show up nearby, they wouldn't dare to approach our shop as long as Old Man Zhao is here. With the exception of those that have completely lost their minds, most spirits are far more polite and respectful of rules than us people." Chan Ping'an nodded in response as he took a sip of wine. It was the same osmanthus wine that had been brought to the shop by the people from the Fan clan. Hence, I'll follow Senior Yang's instructions and refrain from returning to the Dragon Spring Prefecture for now. I'm planning to visit about 3 or 4 places on Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, which should take me over a year in total, and once I'm done, it'll be about time for me to return to Dragon Spring Prefecture. Zheng Dafeng was leaning against the counter as he cast his gaze toward the alley outside the shop, and he casually asked, "Have you ever considered establishing your own sect in Dragon Spring Prefecture?" Chan Ping'an shook his head in response. "I can tell that establishing a sect is an extremely troublesome task just from seeing the lengths that Master Ruan had to go to. Besides, what right do I have to establish a sect of my own?" Zheng Dafeng took a small sip of wine, and a blissful look appeared on his face. It was only a small sip of osmanthus wine, yet it seemed that he was deriving as much enjoyment out of this single sip as someone else would from drinking several large jars of fine wine. A faint smile appeared on his face as he said, "If we can recover the mountains on the western side of Dragon Spring Prefecture one after another to own around a dozen connected mountains, then that would establish a spiritual energy foundation of a sufficient caliber to found an immortal sect. However, it won't be an easy task to get those powers to concede ownership of those mountains. The Great Li Empire was only willing to sell those mountains for such low prices in order to appease the immortal powers in the area. If it wasn't for your ties with Ruan Qiong, you wouldn't have even been able to purchase True Jewel Mountain, much less Downtrodden Mountain." Chan Ping'an nodded earnestly in agreement. Even though Jewel Small World wasn't renowned for its abundance of spiritual energy, for the average golden core or nascent tier cultivator, to be able to own Downtrodden Mountain and establish an abode there would be nothing short of a dream come true. Despite what he had said about how troublesome it was to establish a sect, Chan Ping'an was very much hoping that he would be able to found a sect of his own someday. In fact, he had even already thought of the types of people and features that he wanted to have in his sect. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked the old Heavenly Lord of Peace and Tranquility Mountain about how much it would cost to purchase a mountain protection formation. Zhong Kuei had told Chan Ping'an the story of the old Heavenly Lord of Peace and Tranquility Mountain revealing his Golden Dao manifestation to pursue the sword-carrying white ape while wielding his radiant moon mirror and his 3 swords, and Chan Ping'an also aspired to reach those heights someday. All of the sudden, the old man with the title of Footlong Spear appeared at the entrance of Dust Medicinal Shop, and he strode into the shop with a smile on his face as he declared, "From the looks of it, you're about to leave Old Dragon City soon, right, Chan Ping'an? Before you go, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." Chan Ping'an rose to his feet, then set down his cup and chopsticks as he prompted with a smile, "Go ahead, senior." The old man gestured for Chan Ping'an to continue with his meal, then made his way over to the counter and picked up a few fried peanuts, tossing them into his own mouth. After a brief silence he said, "What I want to ask of you may be a little unreasonable, perhaps even slightly offensive, but when fate comes calling, its call must be answered. Otherwise, once we part ways here, we may never see each other again. There's no way that I can word this delicately, so I'm just going to be straightforward and say what's on my mind. Brother Chan, Brother Dafeng, all that I ask is that you don't kick me out after hearing what I have to say. Over the past few days, I've really come to cherish the relationships that I've built with everyone here, and it would be a real pity if—" "Hurry up and spit it out," Zheng Dafeng snapped. "You're about to put me to sleep if you keep talking in circles." The old man tossed a piece of lotus root into his own mouth, then began chewing on it as he said, Even though Sui Yubian has already become what is known as a lesser grandmaster among martial artists, in my eyes, the bottlenecks ahead of her are far too difficult for her to overcome, and at the very most she'll only be able to become an 8th-tier martial artist. Zhang Dafeng immediately flared up with rage upon hearing this. Only be able to become an 8th-tier martial artist? Do you understand what you're saying right now, you old fart? Go outside and say that again, I dare you. All of the Earth Immortals of Old Dragon City will immediately storm onto the scene and slap you to death. The old man had a very mild personality, and he was completely unbothered by Zhang Dafeng's barbed remarks as he smiled and explained, becoming an 8th-tier martial artist would be a blessing from the heavens for most, but truth be told, Sui Yubian should have never pursued the path of martial arts to begin with. What the hell did you say? Zhang Dafeng yelled as he slammed a fist onto the counter. The old man hurriedly bent down to pick up Chen Ping'an's cup, then filled it with osmanthus wine for himself before raising the cup to Zhang Dafeng as he said, "My apologies, that was a little too direct of me. I'll drink 3 cups as punishment for my rudeness." After downing the first cup of wine, he reached out to pour himself another cup, but Chen Ping'an grabbed onto the flagon with a smile as he said, "Just 1 cup will do, senior. We're all friends here, so there's no need to be so stringent with these formalities." The old man sheepishly set down the cup, then wiped a hand across his lips as he said in a wistful manner, "This is some exceptional wine. It's just a pity that its flavor is a little too delicate, so I would need to drink at least a few cups to be able to fully savor it. What do you want to say? Hurry up." Zhang Dafeng urged as he took a sip of wine himself. Sui Yubian is an extremely rare innate sword prodigy, the old man continued. Not only does she possess the aptitude required to become a sword immortal, most importantly, her sword heart is extremely pure, so there's a very good chance that she'll be able to break through her upper 5 tiers bottleneck as a nascent tier swordsman in the future. Brother Chun, if you're willing to let her go with me and join my sect, I guarantee that in 100 years, 120 at most, I can develop her into an extremely formidable nascent tier swordsman, and from there, I guarantee you that it'll only take her another century at most to reach the unpolished jade tier. Chen Ping'an smiled and offered no response, but he passed his chopsticks to the old man and also poured a cup of wine for him. "You're playing with fire, you old pervert. Are you not afraid of being burned?" Zhang Dafeng sneered. Besides, Sui Yubian is already a Vajrabadi tier martial artist, and it won't be difficult for her to reach the far-roaming tier. All she needs is some time to hone her own physical constitution. However, you're asking her to abandon her martial arts cultivation base and relinquish her true chi, just for some completely baseless promise of becoming an upper 5-tier swordsman in a century or two. I already said that my request was going to be a little unreasonable, didn't I? The old man protested. The problem is that it would be an absolute travesty for someone of Sui Yubian's exceptional aptitude to waste her life pursuing the path of martial arts. If I had never met her, then it would have been fine, but now that I've seen her, I can't bear to not say anything. This is an incredible waste. Think about it, Sui Yubian is such a beautiful girl. Even if she manages to become an 8th-tier martial artist in the future, she'll only be able to brawl with others in physical combat. How terrible a sight would that be? In contrast, wouldn't it be far more elegant and graceful of her to be slaying her enemies while soaring atop her flying sword? You make it sound so easy, Zhang Dafeng scoffed. The more advanced the cultivation base of a pure martial artist, the more dangerous it is for them to relinquish their true chi, particularly for a martial artist of the 3 mind-tempering tiers like her. Even the slightest mishap could cost her her life. What good will all her sword aptitude amount to if she's dead? Do you think you're an ascension tier or immortal tier cultivator? Why should Chen Ping'an offer up such a beautiful maidservant to a lazy old pervert like you? We appreciate beauty, but we are not perverts, and that's a distinction that outsiders are often unable to make. Brother Dafeng, you can insult me, but do not belittle fellow appreciators of beauty like ourselves, the old man said in a serious manner. Zhang Dafeng gave the old man a thumbs up as he praised. That's very well said. I can't pick out anything wrong with that. The old man raised his cup before downing its contents in one go, then stroked his beard as he smiled and said, I knew you and I walked the same path, Brother Dafeng. Our first meeting was a little rocky, but I think we can become great friends. Meanwhile, Qian Pingyan was chewing on a peanut with a contemplative look on his face, and the old man didn't dare to try and rush him into a decision. He was going to be the one that decided whether the old man's request would be fulfilled or not. After some contemplation, Qian Pingyan said, "All I can promise you is that I'll ask Sui Yubian for her opinion on the matter." The old man was astonished to hear this and he exclaimed, "You're actually willing to agree to something?" He then immediately realized that he had misspoken, and a sheepish smile appeared on his face. Everyone was aware of the value and worth of an 8th-tier martial artist. Even in the most powerful mortal empires on Eastern treasured Vile continent, a single 8th-tier martial artist would be a transcendent being that could decide the fate of an entire empire. The old man was very curious about why Qian Pingyan would agree to something, but he decided not to ask in case Qian Pingyan changed his mind. As the old man stood up to depart, Zhang Dafeng escorted him out of the shop, telling Qian Pingyan that he was going out to get some fresh air. They made their way over to the old locust tree on the street outside the alley, and even though it was already nighttime, all of the lanterns in the city ensured that it was still as bright as day. The old man and Zhang Dafeng stood under the tree together, and the former asked, "Why didn't Qian Pingyan ask me about my true identity, and what compensation I'm willing to give him in exchange for Sui Yubian?" "He's the type of person that would only ask those questions if Sui Yubian agreed to go with you," Zhang Dafeng replied. A self-deprecating look appeared on the old man's face as he sighed. "You and I are still far too materialistic. Qian Pingyan is a far better person than us." Zhang Dafeng looked out at the lively and bustling streets as he said in an indifferent manner, "Good people often end up getting the short end of the stick." "That is indeed true," the old man sighed as a sober look appeared on his face. After a brief silence, the old man asked, "What are your plans from here onward, Brother Dafeng?" "I'm nothing but a cripple now, so I'm planning to return to my roots and go back to continue serving as a gatekeeper," Zhang Dafeng replied. "How about you come to my sect? I can't promise too much, but I can guarantee that you won't be wanting for fine wine, delicious food, and beautiful women. You know how I am by now. I'll definitely come to you regularly just to chat, so you won't be bored either," the old man invited. "I don't want to owe you such a big favor, and I no longer have the heart to make such a long journey," Zhang Dafeng replied with a shake of his head. "Don't be so pessimistic," the old man consoled as he patted Zhang Dafeng on the shoulder. "There are no insurmountable hurdles in life." Zhang Dafeng couldn't help but roll his eyes upon hearing this. "You're an upper 5 tiers chi refiner who's still shameless enough to be freeloading food and wine, yet you're telling me, a cripple, to be more optimistic? Do you not feel embarrassed? I thought I had hid my cultivation base." "Very well, but you were still able to see through my identity as a glorious upper 5 tiers immortal. Looks like I can hide my cultivation base all I want, but my aura of majesty will always expose me," the old man sighed. Zhang Dafeng turned to the old man with an exasperated expression as he asked, "There must be countless people in your sect that are lining up to beat you up." "Not at all," the old man denied with a shake of his head. "During my younger days, I was very popular among my junior and senior sisters thanks to my good looks, and whenever any trouble came my way, all of them would clamber over each other to help me. As I grew older, I came to realize that it was not good to revel in the company of women all day, so I began focusing more on my cultivation, and I made rapid progress. Hence, the elders of my sect held me in very high regard and were very protective of me. Now that I'm an old man, I've already reached the pinnacle of the cultivation world, and no one can touch me anymore." Zhang Dafeng patted the old man on the shoulder as he said, "You're very lucky not to have grown up in my hometown. Otherwise, you would have had some humility pummeled into you long ago." The old man merely smiled in response, then murmured to himself, "If Sui Yubian really does agree to join my sect, then I have to think carefully about what I'm going to give her as a welcome present, and I also have to think about what I should give to Qian Pingyan for his willingness to let her go." "Why don't you give Sui Yubian a celestial tool?" Zhang Dafeng jibed. "I can't do that," the old man chuckled. "There's no way I would give her something so precious before she reaches at least the unpolished jade tier. Even then, she'll have to agree to protect my sect for at least 300 years. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to bear parting with such a precious treasure." By the time Pei Qian and the others returned to the medicinal shop, it was already very late at night. Qian Pingyan had been waiting for them at the entrance of the shop the entire time, and she called out to Sui Yubian, telling her that he had something to discuss with her. The two of them slowly walked down the alley together, and Qian Ping'an told her about the old man's intentions of inviting her to cultivate as a swordsman in his sect. Sui Yubian asked Qian Ping'an if he knew anything about the old man, including his name, his cultivation base, and what exactly this sect of his was. Qian Ping'an replied that he would only ask these questions if Sui Yubian agreed to the proposal. In fact, he would even go as far as to send a flying sword letter to Peace and Tranquility Mountain, and request the old Heavenly Lord to verify the information provided by the old man. Only after ensuring that nothing was amiss would he allow Sui Yubian to go with the old man. Sui Yubian fell silent upon hearing this, and she was silent for a long while. Qian Ping'an could only walk out of the alley with her, making their way out onto the street, which was far less lively than it had been during the day. Sui Yubian had perished twice during the battle at the rundown temple, and she met her demise one more time during the battle outside Old Dragon City. Having already died thrice, her martial arts ceiling had been capped at the 8th tier. All of a sudden, Sui Yubian stopped in her tracks as she asked, "You must really want me to go with him, don't you? That way, you'll at least be able to earn a treasure or two as compensation, and the old man will also owe you a favor for your troubles, isn't that right?" Qian Ping'an shook his head in response. "If it isn't for the fact that I have no other choice, I would much rather have you remain by my side. Ideally, I would personally help you scatter your true qi safely, then become a swordsman so that your ceiling can be elevated beyond what you can achieve as a martial artist. However, you have to understand that right now, I'm only a 5th-tier martial artist, and I've only just begun reconstructing my bridge of immortality. If I choose to leave, what are you going to do with my picture scroll?" Sui Yubian asked. "I would keep it safe, of course," Qian Ping'an replied without any hesitation. "There's no one else that I can trust wholeheartedly other than myself. At the very least, I know that I won't use the picture scroll to harm you or extort you. As for whether you believe me or not, that's up to you. Only when the picture scroll is in my possession can I be sure that it won't be used for nefarious purposes. Even if that old man really does intend to treat you well and make you his direct disciple, how can I be sure that everyone around him will also treat you the same way? How can I be certain that they won't use the picture scroll against you to force you to do certain things against your will? When people are in high-up places, they're sometimes forced by the circumstances that they're in to make certain decisions, but that doesn't apply to me. I'm not saying I'm more kind-hearted than the old man, or that I'll treat you better. All I can promise you is that at the very least, I won't treat you like an object that I'll sell to the highest bidder." Sui Yubian stared intently at Qian Ping'an, and he looked back at her in a tranquil manner. "I'm telling you all of this from the bottom of my heart." Sui Yubian didn't immediately make a decision on the old man's offer. Instead, she suddenly changed the subject to something that seemed to be completely unrelated. "That woman from Peace and Tranquility Mountain is very beautiful, and she's also a nascent tier swordsman." "So?" Qian Ping'an asked with a puzzled expression. "Are you not even the slightest bit attracted to her?" Sui Yubian asked. Qian Ping'an rolled his eyes in response, then interlaced his fingers behind his own head as he replied, "There are countless beautiful women under the heavens. If I encounter one, then I'll take an extra glance or two at them. After all, beautiful women are always a sight for sore eyes, but why would I be attracted to them?" In an extremely rare display, Sui Yubian burst into laughter upon hearing this. "You're a man, are you not? How do you not feel any lust when you see a beautiful woman? Is there something wrong with you? If you want to talk, then I'll gladly oblige, but don't go insulting me," Qian Ping'an said in a lazy voice. The two of them returned to the dust medicinal shop, remaining silent the entire time. Pei Qian still wasn't feeling sleepy yet, and she was waiting for Qian Ping'an at the entrance of the shop with her hiking pole in her hand, telling Qian Ping'an that she wanted to show him the fruits of her training. She confidently declared that after witnessing her sword and saber techniques, both Wei Xian and Liu Baixiang had been absolutely entranced. The 4 picture scroll martial artists were all aware that Pei Qian had been taught the white ape saber-wielding technique and the white ape sword-carrying technique by Huang Ting, but they all pretended to be oblivious, and they certainly didn't try and goad Pei Qian into passing the techniques onto them either. They did this partially to uphold a code of honor, and also because they knew that Pei Qian would definitely promise not to tell anyone, only to immediately report them to Qian Ping'an. Given Qian Ping'an's personality, He most likely wasn't going to be very pleased, and the 4-picture scroll martial artists didn't dare to try and push their luck on something. Hence, Sui Yubian made her way into the backyard to avoid watching Pei Qian's demonstration, and only then did Qian Pingyan turn to Pei Qian with a smile as he prompted, "Show me what you've got." Pei Qian nodded in response with a serious expression, then let loose a delicate roar as she stepped forward and swept her hiking pole through the air, unleashing the white ape saber-wielding technique. However, she went into her demonstration with a little too much vigor, and the hiking pole flew straight out of her grasp. Thankfully, Qian Pingyan was able to react in time and catch it right before it struck the wall of the alley. Otherwise, the bamboo hiking pole would have been shattered upon impact. Pei Qian was horrified by her slip-up, and she was anticipating copping another knock to the head. To her surprise, Qian Pingyan returned her hiking pole to her with a smile as he said, "You've got the right spirit. Just make sure to practice your 6-step walking meditation diligently from now on. Otherwise, even if you have the best sword and saber techniques, if you don't have the physical constitution required to unleash them, then you'll only be making a fool out of yourself." Pei Qian stomped a foot onto the ground in frustration and dismay upon hearing this. If she had known that this would be the outcome, then she wouldn't have tried to show off to Qian Pingyan. At the end of all of this, she still had to go back to practicing her walking meditation, and that was a massive pain in the backside. "You need to experience more hardships while you're still young," Qian Pingyan said as he patted her on the head. Pei Qian raised her head with a hopeful look on her face as she asked, "Does that mean that I'll be able to enjoy myself every day once I'm all grown up? Will I no longer have to make transcriptions? Can I drink wine whenever I want and eat whatever I want?" "You'll know the answer to those questions once you're grown up," Qian Pingyan replied with a smile, then led her into the shop before closing the doors. Pei Qian hung her head as she sighed. "I don't really want to grow up. That woman said that I'm not very pretty to look at, so I most likely won't be very pretty even after I've grown up. At my current age, even if I'm ugly, people will still say that I'm cute, but if I grow into an ugly woman, then no one will call me cute anymore." While we were looking at the lanterns today, Julien suddenly said that in a few years, I'll be able to ward off evil spirits even more effectively than adore God. At the time I was really happy to hear that, but I couldn't help but feel like something wasn't quite right. I asked Old Man Wei about it, and he tried to fool me, telling me that what Julien was implying was that once I become an unmatched swordsman, my sword chi will be so powerful that all evil spirits will be afraid of me. In the end, it was Big Sister Sui that told me the truth. She told me that what Julien was saying is that once I grow up, I'll be so hideous that even ghosts will be afraid of me. How could he be so heartless? I always eat an extra half bowl of rice when he's cooking, and I'm always the one who praises his cooking the most, so how could he talk about me like that? An amused look appeared in Qian Pingyan's eyes, and he emulated Pei Qian's demeanor as he sighed. How vexing. Pei Qian found this to be very funny, and a wide smile immediately broke through her sullen expression. After returning to her room, Pei Qian sat down across from Sui Yubian, who was practicing her standing meditation. Pei Qian rested her chin on her hands as she stared intently at Sui Yubian, then asked in a quiet voice, "How are you so beautiful, Big Sister Sui? Can you teach me?" Sui Yubian opened her eyes, and she seemed to be in a rather good mood today as she suppressed her amusement and put on a serious expression before replying, "You have to make sure to be earnest and diligent in everything that you do, including your reading, making transcriptions, your walking meditation, standing meditation, your sword and saber technique practice, and even seemingly trivial tasks like doing your chores." Pei Qian turned her head to the side as she scoffed. "That's clearly not true, Big Sister Sui." Sui Yubian nodded in response, then imitated Huang Ting as she sighed. "You're such a smart girl, it's a pity that you're so depressing to look at." Pei Qian turned away with a sullen expression, then laid her head down onto the edge of the table. After that, she pulled out her prized yellow paper talisman before plastering it to her own forehead as she asked, "Big Sister Sui, do you like my father?" Sui Yubian was rendered speechless by this sudden question. It didn't seem like Pei Qian was actually interested in hearing her answer, either, and before long Sui Yubian had already closed her eyes again to continue practicing her standing meditation, widening her meridians and nourishing her own physical constitution. Pei Qian carefully adjusted the yellow paper talisman on her forehead, then prayed in a quiet voice, "Please protect me and ward off all ghosts and evil spirits, Talisman. That night, the Zhao clan Yin soul approached Chan Ping'an, telling him that he had something to pass on to him from the scholarly sage. As it turned out, Parasol Leaf Sect had officially given its compensation. The golden core of that 12th tier great demon had been refined by Du Mao in Parasol Leaf Small World in his desperate attempt to ascend. In exchange, Parasol Leaf Sect was offering up 2 5-colored Dao manifestation fragments, one of which was roughly the size of a finger, while the other was around the size of a fist. Upon the passing of a 12th tier cultivator, there was a chance that they would leave behind a set of immortal remains. As for 12th tier cultivators that failed in their attempt to ascend, they would leave behind some Dao manifestation fragments that resembled pieces of 5-colored glass. Du Mao had completely disregarded the survival of the disciples of his sect, and he had even gone as far as to destroy Parasol Leaf Small World. The only act of redemption that he had made to slightly quell the fury that everyone in Parasol Leaf Sect felt toward him was that in his final moments in this world, he ensured that 3 of the 4 5-colored fragments formed by his upper body fell back onto the ancestral mountain of Parasol Leaf Sect. The sect had only kept a single one of those fragments, while the other 2 had been offered up to Chan Ping'an as compensation. After delivering this important piece of news to Chan Ping'an, the Zhao clan Yin soul carefully pulled out a palm-sized parasol leaf. This was a minimization treasure that had also been offered up by Parasol Leaf Sect, and it contained the 2 Dao manifestation fragments. On top of that, the scholarly sage had also prepared 2 sets of mountain protection formations for Chan Ping'an. One copied Peace and Tranquility Mountain's formidable sword formation, while the other was a copy of Planchette Writing Sect's mountain protection formation. Parasol Leaf Sect was made to pay the costs of hiring the powerful Mahis cultivators that would place the formations, amounting to a sizable sum of grain rain coins that were also in the minimization treasure. However, Chan Ping'an would have to find the treasures to serve as the cores of the formations on his own, whether that be through making purchases or obtaining suitable treasures from fated opportunities. Finally, the Yin soul concluded, "The scholarly sage advised you to keep the parasol leaf on you at all times, but to try and refrain from opening it to inspect its contents before you return to your hometown. Otherwise, once a minimization treasure is opened, it's the equivalent of temporarily opening a small world, revealing the aura of the contents inside." Ascension Tier Dao manifestation fragments are extremely rare and highly sought after by all cultivators of the upper 5 tiers, so they must be carefully concealed. The scholarly sage has also asked me to advise you to elevate your golden sweet wine robe to a pseudo-celestial tool, and he says that you won't regret it. Chan Ping'an stowed the parasol leaf away, while the Zhao clan Yin soul slowly dissipated into thin air. He had also benefited immensely from passing on those 2 messages for the scholarly sage. Chan Ping'an laid back down onto his makeshift bed in the shop, then stroked the white hairpin in his hair for a moment before closing his eyes to sleep. The next morning, Fan Junmao arrived at the medicinal shop at first light, then took Chan Ping'an to the sea of clouds above Old Dragon City. The old man was already waiting outside the shop, and before he had a chance to say anything to Chan Ping'an, Sui Yubian emerged from the shop to strike up a conversation with him. After that, Sui Yubian made her way into the backyard, while the old man remained outside the shop with a pleased look on his face. It wasn't the best outcome that he had hoped for, but it was certainly close. All he would have to do was wait for a few years, and Jade Tablet Sect would have a brilliant prodigy with hopes of becoming a nascent tier swordsman within a century. Once she reached the nascent tier, he was going to personally take her to visit Parasol Leaf Sect to see if they could contribute, in any way, to the reconstruction of their ancestral hall. As the sun rose up in the east, its resplendent radiance presented a stunning sight to behold on top of the sea of clouds. When the right moment came, both heaven and earth would offer their strength. The refinement of Chan Ping'an's water seal went very smoothly, and the process was completed without a hitch over the span of 10 days. With the water seal successfully refined, a painting of a flowing white river had appeared on the inner wall of his core abode. In the instant that he succeeded, he suddenly felt as if his golden sweet wine robe had become far lighter than before. Emboldened by this liberating sensation, Chan Ping'an allowed the spiritual energy in the sea of clouds to gush into his acupoints as it pleased, and it flowed into a lake in one of his acupoints, producing an ethereal cloud in the process. All it took was a slight bit of effort from Chan Ping'an, and he could ensure that his true qi didn't conflict with the lake in his acupoint and the streams of spiritual energy flowing into it. It was a situation akin to that of the officials in an imperial court. They weren't necessarily going to be close allies, but they weren't sworn enemies either, and they coexisted in relative peace and harmony. Late that night, Chen Ping'an returned to Dust's medicinal shop together with Fan Junmao. The four-picture scroll martial artists opened their eyes momentarily upon sensing his return, then closed their eyes to continue sleeping. The Zhao clan Yin-Soul phased into a nearby wall as a cloud of black smoke, while Zheng Dafeng and Pei Qian remained sound asleep. Chen Ping'an sat down onto the bench, then took a small sip of his basic refinement medicinal wine. Fan Junmao was standing beside him and she asked, "If you were in my place, would you trade this sea of clouds that's been with you for countless years for the position of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent's Southern Mountain God?" "I don't know," Chen Ping'an replied in a truthful manner. Fan Junmao was already in a very foul mood and she snapped, "Then what exactly do you know?" "I know that there are many things that I don't know," Chen Ping'an replied with a smile. Fan Junmao tossed him a sword that she had prepared in advance in her minimization treasure, then vanished from the spot with a displeased expression. The next morning, Chen Ping'an, Pei Qian, and the four-picture scroll martial artists departed from Dust's medicinal shop to make their way to the Immortal Ferry Station on the western side of Old Dragon City. From there, they were going to travel by ship to Azure Phoenix Nation, which was situated in the northeastern region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. Fan Air accompanied them to the ferry station, and he made Chen Ping'an promise not to forget the porcelain that he had promised to craft for Fan Air the next time they met. Zheng Dafeng was staying in his shop on his own, and after looking at the fortune character on the wall for a while, he concluded that it was indeed a lot better looking than the spring character. He then walked a lap around the table in the hall, which had been so often laden with Julien's delicious cooking over the past few days, before sitting down onto the doorstep to look out at the bench under the skywell. That was where Chen Ping'an had frequently sat during his stay, and Pei Qian had sat on it a few times as well. Over time, it was as if that area had become Chen Ping'an's territory. Zheng Dafeng began smoking on his pipe while scratching his own head, thinking about the scolding that he was going to receive from Old Man Yang upon his return to Dragon Spring Prefecture. On the ship, Chen Ping'an was once again carrying a sword on his back. The sword had a very interesting name: Sword Immortal. The Luchuan traveling to Azure Phoenix Nation had been constructed by a Mahist master who specialized in crafting ships. It wasn't particularly remarkable among all of the myriad ships in Old Dragon City, and it could only house less than 200 passengers at a time. It was mostly used for transporting various valuable products from the northern region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent and the southern region of Parasol Leaf Continent. However, the merchant that owned this ship only received the products left over after the 5 major clans of Old Dragon City had already taken their share, so none of the products were of a particularly high quality. Occasionally, some hidden gems would slip through the cracks, fetching several hundred snowflake coins of additional earnings, and that was already worthy of celebration. Azure Phoenix Nation had some renown in the southeastern region of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent for its abundance of Taoist temples and Buddhist monasteries. Various Taoist immortals and high-ranking Buddhist monks often held liberation rites of water and land and heavenly worship ceremonies in Azure Phoenix Nation with funding from the imperial court. On top of that, Azure Phoenix Nation's blue sandalwood Xian paper was also extremely renowned and was sold far and wide to several continents. As a result, the Emperor of Azure Phoenix Nation had always been one of the wealthiest rulers in the southeastern region of the continent. Furthermore, Buddhism wasn't very prevalent on Eastern Treasured Vile Continent, so Azure Phoenix Nation had the greatest number of Buddhist monasteries out of any nation on the continent. The walls of those monasteries were riddled with beautiful writings from revered scholars and poets, attracting countless scholars. Inside a brightly lit room on the top floor of the ship, Chen Ping'an was reading a book about the topography of Azure Phoenix Nation. The book had been purchased from a bookshop in Old Dragon City by Julien, and while Chen Ping'an was reading, Pei Qian was making her transcriptions. The most difficult part of any endeavor was always the beginning. Over time, a habit would develop, and it would no longer be as difficult. The same applied to Pei Qian and her transcriptions. Making daily transcriptions had already become a habit, one that she maintained even without any urging from Chen Ping'an. However, Qian Ping'an knew that if he weren't by her side, then Pei Qian would immediately abandon this habit. At the very most, she would only feel guilty for a day or two, following which she would forget about it entirely. Qian Ping'an had split the basic refinement medicinal wine in his gourd into 5 parts, giving 1 part to each of the 4 picture scroll martial artists. This was one of the few things that pure martial artists could use to enhance their cultivation base. At the moment, Sui Yubian was at the Vajrabadi tier, and her combat prowess was even further enhanced by her deep infatuation sword. Wei Xian and Liu Baixiang were still not close to making breakthroughs yet. However, following their sparring matches against Zheng Dafeng, and the deaths that they had suffered during the battle outside Old Dragon City, their cultivation bases had been elevated slightly further. On top of that, the 4 picture scroll martial artists couldn't be compared with normal 6th and 7th tier martial artists to begin with. Over the course of their journey, as long as they didn't encounter any deranged cultivators of the upper 5 tiers, Qian Ping'an was confident that they would be able to survive any ordeal. Even if they were to encounter a nascent tier earth immortal, as long as they weren't a swordsman, his group would be able to put up a good fight. In fact, if the 4 picture scroll martial artists were willing to sacrifice themselves, perhaps Qian Ping'an could even come out on top. Regrettably, Qian Ping'an had given the Azure Sword suppressing talisman inscribed by Zhong Kuei using the wind and snow all to Zheng Dafeng for him to use during the battle on the dragon scaling platform. The sword trapped within the talisman just so happened to be the sword immortal that Qian Ping'an was carrying on his back. Fu Qi wasn't a swordsman, and even though this sword was a pseudo-celestial weapon, it wasn't a bonded item of his, so Zheng Dafeng was able to trap the sword using his sword-suppressing talisman. Even though he wasn't able to trap it for long, Fu Qi still quickly surrendered. If Qian Ping'an were still in possession of the sword-suppressing talisman, he would have nothing to fear even if he were to encounter a malicious nascent-tier swordsman. In fact, if he could catch them off guard with the sword-suppressing talisman, then he could even turn the tables and secure victory himself. Having said that, losses of this nature weren't enough to weigh on Qian Ping'an's mind for long. What Qian Ping'an was truly saddened by was the fact that this talisman was one of the final 2 talismans that Zhong Kuei had inscribed as a noble scholar, so using it up was like bidding farewell to the memory of a good friend. Compared with the intercontinental ships that Qian Ping'an had witnessed and traveled on, this ship was downright tiny. It didn't even have an observation deck, and he could only look out at the scenery through his window. After Pei Qian completed her transcriptions, Qian Ping'an carefully examined them to ensure that there weren't rushed characters that had to be rewritten, and after that, he began practicing walking meditation with her, something that he made her do for a minimum of 4 hours per day. In the past, Qian Ping'an hadn't found this practice to be boring or particularly laborious. Only after witnessing Pei Qian practicing the same walking meditation did he come to realize that even though the 6-step walking meditation was very simple, practicing it for 1,000,000 repetitions was a very difficult task, both physically and mentally. Qian Ping'an was keeping a constant eye on Pei Qian's condition, and it didn't take long before she was sweating profusely. Strands of hair were clinging to her forehead from her sweat, and her complexion had turned very pale. Even though she didn't dare to whine or complain, the smile had completely faded from her face, and with each step that she took, her frail body would tremble involuntarily. Qian Ping'an remained expressionless this entire time, but internally, he was feeling very sympathetic toward her. On the first day, Pei Qian had been very excited to commence her walking meditation practice, and thanks to this excitement, she was able to persevere the entire 4 hours. In the end, she was carried to the neighboring room by Qian Ping'an on his back. The next day, she was only able to last 2 hours before falling to the ground in a deflated manner while cramping incessantly. For the next few days after that, Qian Ping'an relented a little, only making her complete 2 hours of walking meditation while adding on a little more time with each passing day. Even so, this still proved to be an extremely exhausting endeavor for Pei Qian. Initially, she still had the strength to glower at Zhu Lian whenever he mocked her while watching her practice her walking meditation, but after that, she didn't even have the strength to glare anymore. Only after 10 days had passed did the smile on Pei Qian's face finally return. At this point, the most difficult part of the journey was already behind her, and her signature swagger was back. On this day, Zhu Lian approached Qian Ping'an. "Young master, I can see that Pei Qian possesses exceptional martial arts aptitude. While honing the body, the more hardships one endures, the stronger the foundation they'll be able to build, so I think that she would do well with 4 hours of walking meditation a day. In response to this suggestion from Zhu Lian, Pei Qian once again had the energy to glower at him. After completing their walking meditation, the two of them opened the window to practice their standing meditation. Pei Qian was too short to see out the window, so she could only face the wall. After securing Chen Ping'an's approval, she dragged a chair over to the window so that she could stand on it and look out at the sea of clouds with Chen Ping'an. You have to believe that your efforts will be rewarded, Chen Ping'an said in a quiet voice. At the moment, Pei Qian was only going through the motions with her standing meditation, so she wasn't benefiting much from it at all. Chen Ping'an was rather perplexed by this, and he had asked Sui Yubian and the others about it, but they weren't able to provide any answers either. Pei Qian was very happy to have just endured another grueling day of walking meditation, and a thought suddenly sprang into her mind as a look of longing appeared in her eyes. Will I also be able to have a sword when I go out exploring the world in the future? Ideally, I'd also want to carry a saber strapped to my waist like Little Bai. By that time, I'll definitely be a lot stronger than I am now, so it won't be too heavy for me. Chen Ping'an smiled as he nodded in response. As long as you don't slack off, I can promise you now that I'll definitely give you a sword and a saber when you decide to go out exploring the world by yourself in the future. Pei Qian was feeling a little embarrassed as she said in a quiet voice, I've already thought about it. Once I have my own sword and saber, I'm going to strap them to my waist on the same side, and I've even thought of a name for them. Do you want to hear the name, father? Go ahead, Chen Ping'an prompted with a smile. Chen Ping'an had always been quite proficient when it came to naming things. I'll call them saber sword cross because they'll be crossed over each other while strapped to my waist. What do you think, father? Pei Qian asked with a hopeful expression. I think that's great, Chen Ping'an replied with a smile. An elated smile immediately appeared on Pei Qian's face as she pinched her index finger and thumb together and said, I'll be very happy if my sword is even this little bit as good as yours. Chen Ping'an turned to her with a smile as he said, Once we reach Azure Phoenix Nation, we'll continue on foot, and when we pass by a bamboo forest, I'll pick out some older bamboo trees to craft a bamboo sword and a bamboo saber for you. You can strap them to your waist and carry them around if you like. Make them light and small so that they won't be too heavy to carry around, Pei Qian requested. Chen Ping'an smiled and nodded in response, then cast his gaze toward the clouds outside the window as he casually asked, What are you going to do with your hiking pole? That's my right-hand man. It's accompanied me on such a long journey I can't just throw it away. Pei Qian replied without any hesitation. I'm going to allow it to retire and return to the fields to start a family of its own. I'll ask Old Man Wei about what type of official title I should bestow upon it. That's the correct way to go, Chen Ping'an praised with a pleased nod. Over at Dust's medicinal shop in Old Dragon City, Zheng Dafeng really didn't have much to pack at all. His only belongings consisted of some sets of clothes and that old pipe. It seemed that no matter where he was, whether that be Jewel Small World or Old Dragon City, he would always have very little in terms of belongings. There was nothing that was particularly important to him, and he could leave anything behind at any time. He was going to travel to the Dragon Spring Prefecture on one of the Fu Clan's ships the next day, so this was the final day that he was going to be spending in Old Dragon City, and he was sitting on a stool under the old locust tree. The old man had already left, telling Zheng Dafeng that he was going to visit a friend in the Invincible Divine Fist sect. Li Er had returned to Old Dragon City a day ago, and Fu Qi immediately paid the shop a visit with his son Fu Donghai. Fu Qi made it clear to the two of them that Fu Donghai was the perpetrator behind this entire debacle, and all Zheng Dafeng had to do was give the word, and he would allow Li Er to smash Fu Donghai's Bridge of Immortality. Zheng Dafeng asked Fu Qi why he hadn't snapped his son's Bridge of Immortality himself before bringing him to the shop. After all, wouldn't that be a greater show of sincerity? Fu Qi had no response to this. To his credit, Fu Donghai was quite a courageous man. Not only did he not beg for mercy, he even provoked Li Er with some verbal taunts, almost as if he wanted to have his own Bridge of Immortality snapped. At the time, Zheng Dafeng was sitting in the courtyard, smoking his pipe with a weary expression. Clearly, Old Man Yang had already made deals with the Great Li Empire, the Fu clan and the Fan clan. Once the army of the Great Li Empire reached Old Dragon City, Fan Junmao would be able to become the Great Li Empire's second great mountain god after Wei Bo, and in exchange all that old man Yang had to give up was Zheng Dafeng's martial arts cultivation base. Zheng Dafeng knew that the matter had already been settled, so he simply told Fu Qi and Fu Donghai to leave, not wanting any further involvement with them. Fu Qi was very relieved to hear this, and he was just about to depart with Fu Donghai when Li Er suddenly threw a punch straight into Fu Donghai's chest. Not only was his bridge of immortality snapped, it was completely obliterated. Li Er turned to Fu Qi with an indifferent expression as he said, "I think that a father should stick up for his son." Fu Qi picked up the unconscious Fu Donghai from the ground, and there was not even a hint of anger on his face as he smiled and said, "I'm glad you were able to let off some steam, Mr. Li Er. I'll be returning to my manor now. Farewell." "Oh? Why don't you take me there so I can pay a visit to your Fu clan's ancestral hall?" Li Er suggested with a smile. Fu Qi's expression instantly darkened significantly upon hearing this. "That's enough, Li Er," Zheng Dafeng sighed in a weary manner. Not long after Fu Qi departed with Fu Donghai, Li Er left Old Dragon City. Zheng Dafeng was basking in the warm, early spring sun on his own under the locust tree, wearing a comfortable cotton jacket that Pei Qian and the others had purchased for him. The woman that he hadn't seen for a long time showed up once again. It seemed that she had eaten very well over the New Year period, and she had become even more rotund as a result. As opposed to only strutting around back and forth in front of Zheng Dafeng on this occasion, she mustered up the courage to approach them, then asked in a shy voice, "Is your shop hiring shopkeeper Zheng?" Zheng Dafeng smiled and shook his head in response. "I'm going back to my hometown tomorrow. It's too hard to make a living in Old Dragon City." The woman was ridiculously fat, but her voice was very mellow and pleasing to the ears, and she asked in a disappointed manner, "Are you coming back?" "I don't think so," Zheng Dafeng replied with a shake of his head. "Isn't this an old residence left behind by your ancestors? What are you going to do with the shop?" she asked. Zheng Dafeng fought back the urge to laugh as he replied, "I'll just leave it as it is. It's dust medicinal shop, so why not let it gather some dust? How about you give me the key and I'll look after the place for you?" the woman proposed with a slight blush on her face. "It would be a real pity to leave this place completely uncared for." "There's no need for that, but thank you for the kind offer," Zheng Dafeng replied with a wave of his hand. Zheng Dafeng took a glance up at the sky, and even though it was still the middle of the day, he declared that it was getting late, and that he had to go back to the shop to pack up his belongings. The woman bit down onto her own lower lip as she watched Zheng Dafeng flee the scene with his stool in his hand, and she suddenly asked, "You're not even going to ask my surname, shopkeeper Zheng?" Zheng Dafeng wasn't shameless enough to pretend to not have heard anything, so he could only stop in his tracks and turn around before asking, "What's your surname?" "I like eating raw ginger, so my surname is Jiang," the woman replied with a wide smile. Zheng Dafeng was rendered speechless upon hearing this. What was he supposed to say to that? He knew from how the woman had previously been walking back and forth in front of him without ever approaching him that she was a very polite woman who knew not to force herself upon others, and this time was no exception. She extended a curtsy toward Zheng Dafeng and said, "I wish you a smooth journey, shopkeeper Zheng." Zheng Dafeng smiled and waved farewell to her. That night, in a secluded area to the north of Old Dragon City, a new grave had been built, and there were several bright red sheets of paper sitting on top of the grave, weighed down by a few small stones. Zheng Dafeng was standing in front of the grave, and after burning a book, he set down 10 small oil lamps before the grave. There was black oil inside the lamps and they were giving off a baleful aura, but there were no wicks inside them, so it was unclear how they were supposed to be lit. All of a sudden, the Zhao clan Yin soul appeared out of thin air, then flicked his fingers at the oil lamps one after another. The 10 oil lamps lit up in succession, and upon closer inspection, one would discover that the flames inside them were actually humanoid in form. The faces of those miniature humanoid figures were all twisted in excruciating agony, as if they were being burned alive inside the lamps. The 10 lamps contained the 3 immortal souls and 7 mortal forms of a certain man. The man's immortal souls and mortal forms had been abducted out of his physical body by the Yin soul. Zheng Dafeng continued to stand before the grave as he said in a gentle voice, "I'm worried that you're going to be scared of such a harrowing sight, so I'll stay here until the lamps burn out before I leave. Over at the Sun clan's ancestral residence, Sun Jiashu was strolling on his own along the riverbank in the night. Even though the Sun clan's old ancestor was already a nascent tier Earth immortal, he still couldn't help but be overcome with remorse these past few days. In contrast, Sun Jiashu was a lot more composed, consoling his ancestor and telling him that they were simply fated to miss out on this opportunity, and that the Sun clan simply didn't have much fortune when it came to making money through unconventional means. A handsome young man suddenly appeared beside Sun Jiashu without any warning, and even the Sun clan's ancestor and the 3 Golden Core tier guest elders were completely caught off guard by his arrival. It was the same wise man who had helped Sun Jiashu undo the knot in his heart during their last meeting, and Sun Jiashu immediately extended a respectful bow toward him as he greeted. I pay my respects to Mr. Fan. As a result of the plot that he had hatched against Chen Ping'an, not only had Sun Jiashu almost made an enemy out of Chen Ping'an, he had almost lost Lu Baqiao as a friend as well. It was none other than this wise man who was far older than he appeared that had approached the disheartened Sun Jiashu and provided him with the guidance required to get him out of his rut. You're walking a path that's already taking you very far. Just because you've been tripped up by a rock and taken a hard fall, does that mean that you're walking the wrong path? Just because the path that Chen Ping'an is walking is a very good one, does that mean that the path you're walking is bad? If you're so naive that you see things in such a black and white fashion with no nuances considered, then I suggest you give up on becoming a businessman entirely. No matter how good someone else's path is, that's still someone else's path. You should focus on yourself and don't compare yourself with others. Granted, you can look up occasionally to see what others are doing, but a glance or two here and there will suffice. Those were very profound and priceless words that resonated deep within Sun Jiashu's heart. The man had only told Sun Jiashu that his surname was Fan, but according to him, he had no relation to the Fan clan of Old Dragon City. Sun Jiashu's intuition told him that the man was telling the truth. The man smiled as he said, from now on, there will essentially only be 3 major clans left in Old Dragon City. One of them is the Fu clan, which now belongs to Wang Zhu. The second one is the Fan clan, which essentially belongs to the Old Divine Lord, and half of the final one consists of your Sun clan, while the Ding, Feng, and Ho clans combine to take up the other half. This northbound journey is going to be a long and arduous one, so make sure to mentally prepare yourself. Sun Jiashu nodded in response. Our Sun clan is definitely not going to miss out on this once in a blue moon opportunity. Once in a blue moon? I think you're underestimating just how massive this opportunity is, the man said with a smile. Sun Jiashu faltered slightly upon hearing this, and as he pondered the meaning of those words, he thought back to the day when he had gone to see off Chen Ping'an in secret. It seemed that Chen Ping'an had only spotted him in the crowd after the ship had risen up into the air. He did not pretend to not notice Sun Jiashu. Moreover, he cupped his fist in a parting salute before giving him a thumbs up, while Sun Jiashu responded with a faint smile. Inside the imperial palace of a newly founded empire, a master and disciple duo was walking along between a pair of tall walls. One of them was a handsome, white-robed young man tracing a finger over the wall beside him as he walked. He was accompanied by a woman who was very tall, but didn't appear to be lanky or uncoordinated at all. The most remarkable thing about her was that she had no aura at all. She wasn't one with the world like a chi refiner, nor did she possess the aura of a pure martial artist. In fact, she wasn't even breathing at all. There was a scabbard strapped to her waist, but there was no sword in it. She had only just obtained this completely unremarkable-looking bamboo scabbard several days ago, and it was meant for the sword that she had been sharpening in the pool of lightning on Stalactite Mountain. It had been sourced for her by one of her servants from Eastern Treasured Vile Continent after much trouble. The white-robed young man turned to her with a smile as he asked, "Was this purchased or taken by force, mistress?" "I was told that it was purchased," the woman replied in an indifferent manner. "In that case it was purchased by force," the young man sighed. The woman smiled. "If you think that's not the right way to do things, then you can fight him." "How am I supposed to fight him? I'm only a 5th-tier martial artist at the moment," the young man sighed in resigned manner. "But you're the strongest 5th-tier martial artist under the heavens. Isn't that right, Chao Ci?" the woman said as she stopped in her tracks. Chao Ci was silent for a moment, then traced the tip of his foot over the ground to draw a pair of short lines, one on the left and one on the right. He then lifted his foot and pointed at the line on the left as he said, "In terms of fifth-tier martial artists, this is where the average martial arts prodigy is." He then pointed at the line on the right as he continued, "I'm over here." He then pointed at a spot right in the middle between the two lines as he concluded, "This is roughly where the most exceptional fifth-tier martial arts prodigies on Middle-earth Divine Continent are." The woman didn't think that this was an arrogant statement at all. In fact, she felt like Chao Ci was being too modest. All of a sudden, Chao Ci squatted down and drew another line with his finger, one that was slightly closer to the line on the right, and he said, "I think that's roughly where that man is as a fifth-tier martial artist." The woman looked down the new line that Chao Ci had drawn, and she nodded in agreement as she said, "That seems about right." As the two of them were conversing with each other, they were approached by the most powerful eunuch of the empire, the seal-holding eunuch that had hopes of reaching the immortal tier, and he was followed by a group of chief eunuchs dressed in bright red python robes. As soon as the group of eunuchs caught sight of the duo, they immediately stopped in their tracks before extending respectful bows, not even daring to breathe too loudly. After the ship arrived at the ferry station on the border of Azure Phoenix Nation, Qian Ping'an and his entourage were walking down a lively and bustling street leading out of the ferry station, and for some reason, all of the qi refiners and martial artists that they encountered chose to walk around them. This was particularly true for the cultivators of the middle 5 tiers with the sharpest instincts and the most experienced martial artists of the 3 qi tempering tiers. The sharper their intuition was, the more clearly they sensed the indescribable pressure emanating from Qian Ping'an's group. Most of their attention was drawn to the 4-picture scroll martial artists, but from the perspective of a golden core tier cultivator that had concealed his own aura to blend into the crowd, he felt like the auras of the 4 of them combined couldn't compare with that of the sword-bearing young man, who was clearly carrying some rather severe internal injuries. He was like a bright moon nestled in a bed of stars. Qian Ping'an had passed by immortal ferry stations several times before. Apart from the ferry station located on the border between Watercombing Nation and Pinestream Nation, where he had made a purchase at Green Beetle Shop, Qian Ping'an had largely passed by the other ferry stations in a rush. He had stopped at some of them and wandered around, yet he hadn't made any purchases. Today he decided to take Pei Qian and the others with him and spend a good amount of time wandering around this ferry station. Qian Ping'an gave each of his 4 subordinates a single lesser heat coin, allowing them to purchase whatever they wanted. There was the so-called magnitudes of 10 rule when it came to immortal currency, and this rule referred to the fact that 1 snowflake coin was worth 1,000 taels of silver, while 1 lesser heat coin was worth 100,000 taels of silver. Buying spirit tools or immortal treasures with 1 lesser heat coin was nothing but a pipe dream, but a few rare and interesting trinkets from the mountains were very much affordable. After agreeing with Wei Xian and the others to meet at the most famous landmark of the ferry station in 2 hours, Qian Ping'an left with Pei Qian to wander around on their own. When purchasing items at ferry stations, it would be incredibly difficult to find a bargain at places like Green Beetle Shop, where there would be skilled appraisers evaluating each treasure. Moreover, treasures in such shops would be relatively expensive compared to other shops. On the other hand, one could try their luck with merchants who peddled their goods in cloth wrappers. This was a gamble, and at the same time a test of one's appraisal skills. These wandering merchants were often vagrant cultivators and itinerant cultivators, who called the entire world their home. They liked to purchase treasures from declining clans at a low price, and some liked to claim that their clan or sect had produced earth immortals at the golden core tier or nascent tier before. This was a common theme among the wandering merchants, so potential buyers didn't need to concern themselves with these trivial matters. Qian Ping'an had learned many things from Su Yuanxia when traveling around the nations with him and Zhang Shanfeng, and the so-called caged haggling that Yao Jinji had mentioned also pertained to the process of making transactions with these wandering merchants. Pei Qian hadn't seen much of the world yet, so she was fascinated by the myriad of immortal paintings, spirit tools and mountain spirits that were sold in the various types of shops. However, there was one good thing about the little girl who Zhu Lian ridiculed as a taotai, a beast of gluttony. She liked to collect trinkets, and she wouldn't turn down anything that came her way. However, she didn't like to spend money, and she wouldn't waste a single copper coin more than she had to. Similarly, Qian Ping'an wasn't someone to spend his money extravagantly, After wandering around for an hour and entering more than a dozen shops with Pei Qian, they had yet to spend a single copper coin. They came across a wandering merchant as they walked, an honest-looking middle-aged man who appeared to be lame. He said that his surname was Lu, so they could refer to him as Skinny Lu. After catching the attention of this young man who was dressed in white robes and carrying a sword in a white scabbard on his back, Skinny Lu followed him for more than 700 paces. Skinny Lu looked like an honest person, and he wasn't bad at speaking either. He claimed that his grandfather was a great general of Wenjing Nation, and after the nation was destroyed, the emperor of the nation had died while fleeing for his life. A hornless dragon imperial seal, one of the 17 treasures of the Hall of Union, had fallen into his grandfather's hands and been brought into the common world. Right now, an esteemed immortal from Azure Phoenix Nation had already gathered 16 of the 17 treasures, and they were only missing this hornless dragon imperial seal, which was regarded as a divine treasure that could gather fortune. When it came to collectors, achieving a complete collection was always the primary aim. Thus, this hornless dragon imperial seal, which was rumored to potentially harbor some remaining fortune of the destroyed Wenjing Nation, was worth an absolute fortune. There were 2 reasons why Skinny Lu had followed Chan Ping'an for more than 700 paces. Firstly, the wealthy-looking young man was extremely good-tempered and didn't shoo him away. Instead, he listened to Skinny Lu's explanation very carefully. Secondly, Skinny Lu would suffer greatly if he didn't get any business soon. He had gone to great lengths and just barely managed to scrape through last year, and the transaction value of 3 lesser heat coins was more than enough to purchase his life several times over. Skinny Lu had celebrated the new year in a frugal manner with fear and trepidation in his heart, and according to the rules, he would definitely face punishment if he failed to trick another wealthy idiot before the conclusion of the first month. Each nation had its own laws, just as each profession had its own rules. Moreover, these rules could truly punish him with death. It could be said that Skinny Lu was pulling out all the stops to try and stay alive. As a third-tier chi refiner, he not only shamelessly followed Chan Ping'an around, but even started to introduce the ferry station to the wealthy young master. The immortal ferry station located on the border of Azure Phoenix Nation was called Wasptail Ferry Station, and it had initially been an ordinary small town. At one point, someone from this town, more specifically from the very bottom of society, had ended up becoming an unpolished jade-tier immortal. As a vagrant cultivator, he had relied on his steely resolve and incredible fated opportunities to advance to the upper 5 tiers. Afterward, stories of his feats and immortal achievements had spread throughout half of the continent, bringing him great fame among the vagrant cultivators and itinerant cultivators of Eastern Treasured Vile Continent. This immortal's ancestral home was located on a small alley called Narrow Wasp Alley, at the tail end of the alley. Thus, the future generations decided to honor him by naming the ferry station Wasptail Ferry Station. The ferry station was located on the border between 3 nations, and the ownership of Narrow Wasp Alley and the esteemed immortal's ancestral home was also hotly contested. As a result, the Imperial Tang clan of Azure Phoenix Nation had used both calligraphy brushes and sharp blades to clash with its 2 neighbors during the past several hundred years. Many battles were fought on paper and on the battlefield, yet all 3 sides tacitly agreed that their battles shouldn't go as far as to involve the immortal ferry station. In order to make sure of this, Lakeview Academy had specially dispatched noble scholars and virtuous scholars several times to offer mediation between the 3 neighboring nations. As they walked, Skinny Lu earnestly recommended that they try the Wellwater Immortal Wine, a type of wine unique to the ferry station. This wine costs 1 snowflake coin for a small pot, and it was often purchased by officials and nobles from Azure Phoenix Nation who wanted to flaunt their wealth. To his surprise, Chan Ping'an genuinely stopped by a tavern at the street corner and purchased a pot of Wellwater Immortal Wine. Chan Ping'an asked the shopkeeper for 2 white bowls, and he smiled and gestured for Skinny Lu to join him at the table after he sat down. Skinny Lu had initially wanted to turn down the offer and remain standing on the street. That way, he could pretend to be pitiful and hopefully gain some sympathy from the wealthy young master. If his performance were good enough, the wealthy young master might even purchase his useless trinkets out of compassion. However, his mind couldn't defeat his tongue, and he eventually sat down to drink with Chan Ping'an. While Skinny Lu drank, he continued to scold himself for failing to suppress his desires. Now that he had given in, he would most likely fail to make any transaction with the wealthy young master in white. He was filled with mixed emotions, and he decided to treat this as his last bowl of wine before death. Qian Ping'an clinked bowls with the wandering merchant and asked with a smile, "If the imperial seal is so valuable, and if that esteemed immortal is so desperate to obtain it to complete his collection of 17 treasures from Wenjing Nation, then why don't you directly visit him to sell the imperial seal?" Skinny Lu had naturally prepared a response to this kind of question. With a bitter smile he said, "That elderly earth immortal possesses a profound cultivation base, yet his character is, well, I'm afraid that I won't survive to spend the money that he gives me." Skinny Lu's voice was deep and quiet. Qian Ping'an nodded in understanding. This was a reasonable response, especially since immortals from the mountains cultivated all kinds of Dao, including a myriad of heretical Das. After all, weren't there people like Du Mao among Paramount Ascension tier immortals? Back in his hometown, hadn't he also come across Lu Jimao, the river-severing true lord from Bamboo Scroll Lake? As for the ill-intentioned Qi refiners whom he had encountered on Sky Calling Street, they might have truly struck it rich and been enjoying an extravagant life right now if they had managed to encircle and kill him and Lu Tai. Using their newfound wealth, they might have even advanced to the Golden Core tier. Unfortunately for these people, however, they had traveled 1,000 li just to offer up their heads, losing their lives and possessions to Qian Ping'an and Lu Tai. Skinny Lu was likely convinced that he would lose his opportunity with this wealthy young master from out of town if he didn't reveal something radical soon. He placed his wine bowl on the table and lowered his voice, saying, "In reality, it's only because of a taboo that I introduced my grandfather as a great general of Wenjing Nation. My grandfather was actually an official in Peace Square, a place located in the capital of Wenjing Nation that was initially used for raising all kinds of rare and peculiar beasts. However, the square was eventually abandoned due to a lack of funds, and in the end it was used to house eunuchs and palace maids who had made mistakes and been kicked out of the palace. The final emperor of Wenjing Nation grew up in Peace Square, which housed all kinds of filth and vermin. My grandfather always looked after him, and he somehow managed to climb the ranks and go from an illegitimate son, hidden in Peace Square, to the emperor of the nation. Regardless of why the Wenjing Nation was destroyed, he could still be regarded as a grateful emperor who treated my grandpa with respect. After the capital was breached by the formidable army from Lofty Sky Nation, the emperor fled back to Peace Square to seek refuge. I was still little back then, so I don't remember much of what happened. In any case, I eventually received the imperial seal from my grandfather. Before my grandfather passed away, he reminded me that I definitely had to give the imperial seal to a descendant of Wenjing Nation. He said that I couldn't treat it as my own possession. After saying this, Skinny Lu drank a mouthful of wine and continued with a dazed expression, "I'm such an unfilial descendant. I've betrayed my grandfather's final wish, and I've also betrayed the crown prince of Wenjing Nation, who's said to have changed his name and fled to the mountains to cultivate Dao." With quivering lips and tears in his eyes, Skinny Lu pleaded, "Young master, please do a good deed and purchase the precious imperial seal. That way I can buy wine to intoxicate myself and wash away my sorrows. I won't need to face the imperial seal and feel immeasurable guilt every single day." Qian Ping'an poured Skinny Lu another bowl of well-water immortal wine, and he shook his head and replied, "I can treat you to wine, but I won't purchase the imperial seal from you." Skinny Lu was unwilling to give up, and he asked, "Young master, are you not even going to take a look at the imperial seal? Are you not going to check whether it's genuinely real and valuable? I'm sure that you can appraise it with a single glance. In fact, I won't regret my decision even if you drive a hard bargain." Qian Ping'an shook his head again, replying, "I don't have much luck when it comes to getting windfalls, so I'll pass on this one. You should look for someone who has both good fortune and good appraisal skills. You shouldn't waste your time on me." Pei Qian was just about to speak, but she immediately shut up when she saw Qian Ping'an glancing over. After finishing his second bowl of wine, Skinny Lu apologized and thanked Qian Ping'an for his hospitality. He then stood up and left in despondence. Only then did Pei Qian say in a quiet voice, "He's quite pitiful." Qian Ping'an took a sip of wine and concurred. "It's true that he's quite pitiful. However, the imperial seal that he's peddling isn't necessarily real." "You didn't look at it, so how do you know?" Pei Qian asked in confusion. What if it was actually real? It's not like we're not in a hurry to get anywhere right now. If the 1 in 10,000 chance of winning the what if truly lands on our heads, then that will naturally be the best result. However, what about the worst-case scenario? Chen Ping'an explained patiently. Pei Qian was at a loss and she replied, the worst-case scenario is simply that the imperial seal is fake and we fail to realize this, so we get scammed of immortal currency by that person? The skinny little girl suddenly slammed the table and exclaimed with a pained expression, that's absolutely unforgivable. Chen Ping'an smiled and said, what kind of worst-case scenario is this? The worst-case scenario is if someone sets up a trap and forces us to buy their goods. Not only that, but they might even take things further once we pay them immortal currency. They might decide to kill us to steal all of our belongings. Think of Skinny Lou's character. We don't really know what he's like, so it would be risky to deal with him even if he's not an innately bad person. If he's facing some insurmountable challenge, for example, if he owes a huge debt and he's a weak-natured person, yet the debt collectors are extremely vicious people, then that will be a case of a pitiful person having a detestable quality. If we take pity on him now, then who will take pity on us in the future? Pei Qian carefully thought about this for a moment before replying, there are quite a few of us and we're in the right anyway, so can't we just kill him with a few punches if it truly comes to that? Chen Ping'an immediately flicked her on the forehead and scolded, if we simply rely on our fists to reason with other people in the world, then Du Mao is the best example of what can happen. Du Mao eventually came across us, so what if we also come across our own nemesis? But we're good people, aren't we? Pei Qian asked in an aggrieved voice. Old criminal Du was a bad person, so he deserved to be punished by the heavens and struck by lightning. After death, he deserves to be tossed into boiling oil, have his tongue ripped out, have his organs dissected, have molten metal poured into his mouth. Chen Ping'an interrupted Pei Qian's nonsense and asked, where did you learn these things from? There was lingering fear in Pei Qian's heart as she replied, when we were appreciating the lanterns in Old Dragon City during the Lantern Festival, Little Bai told me that some of the lanterns are used for deterring evil and promoting good. I opened my eyes wide to look at them for a while, but I felt like these lanterns had little to do with me. However, the books say that a person should correct their mistakes if they've committed them, and to avoid them if they haven't. Chen Ping'an's sword nurturing gourd was filled with medicinal wine now, so it could no longer be used for holding well-water immortal wine from this fairy station. The Fan clan had also given him many pots of osmanthus wine, which were sitting in his jade tablet minimization treasure right now. Thus, Chen Ping'an had enough good wine to last him an entire year. That being the case, Chen Ping'an only purchased 2 pots of well-water immortal wine, planning to put them together with the osmanthus wine later. When he returned to Downtrodden Mountain, he would bury all of this wine behind the bamboo building and retrieve a single pot every 10 years. This would become one part of his enviable wealth.